Hello everyone. Today we are going to dive into 7 real-life cases, each of which has garnered public and media attention. While investigating each of these 7 cases, the detectives faced some challenges. However, evidence, witness testimony, and in some cases, surveillance footage eventually made it possible to get to the truth. In this video, we take a look at the events that took place in 2001 in the American state of Washington. 36-year-old Dana Laskowski was a mother of 8-year-old triplets when she was found lying face down on a couch in her own home. For police, it was a tangled mystery with several suspects. Detectives checked out Dana's ex-husband, they checked out her boyfriend, they checked out other men. But the ending of this story was unpredictable, and the truth that was revealed shocked Dana's family. In 2001, Dana Laskowski was living in Puyallup, Washington, a quaint, quiet city with nature trails and tree-lined streets. Puyallup is a safe city with a low crime rate. But in August 2001, on an ordinary day, police receive a disturbing call about one of the city's newest residents. Dana was babysitting for 2 doctors and was supposed to arrive at work at 7:30 a.m., but she never showed up. This was very unusual for her, as she is very responsible. Her employers called the police and asked them to check on her welfare. At 11 a.m., the police arrived at Dana's house to make sure she was okay. They knocked on the door, but there was no answer. After checking the perimeter and looking in the windows, they did not see anything unusual. However, they found the back door open and decided to enter the house. The officers found Dana on the couch in the living room, under the blankets. She was lying with her head propped up on her arm and her other hand placed behind her back. Unfortunately, she was dead. Police did a cursory examination of the body for injuries such as stab wounds or gunshot wounds. They didn't find any of it, but they did notice injuries on her neck. There were marks indicating that she had been strangled. Sure, there are crime scenes where there are blood spatters, a victim on the ground, visible injuries, maybe a mess all over the room. That's not what happened in Dana's house. There were no weapons, nothing really broken. Dana was lying face down on the couch. When police turned her over, they found bruises on her neck and dried blood around her nose and ears. The medical examiner ruled that Dana had died from being strangled to death, probably by her own scarf. So police were looking for any trace evidence, DNA, body fluids, anything they could use to try to identify the killer. Dana's body was lying on the couch in an unnatural position. One of her arms was wrapped behind her back. She was lying face down. This suggested that there had been a struggle between her and the perpetrator. Whoever did this had enough strength to overpower someone who was literally fighting for her life. The facts indicated that the perpetrator was strong. There were abrasions on Dana's knees and elbows, indicating that she was not killed on the couch. Forensics treated the living room carpet with luminol and found traces of blood on it. This indicated that Dana was killed on the floor. The person who killed her then picked her up and placed her on the couch and covered her with a blanket. Investigators speculated that the killer was trying to make Dana comfortable. In this case, the fact that she was covered with a blanket may indicate that the perpetrator was feeling remorse or guilt. Maybe the killer was someone who felt affection for Dana. This isn't some random burglar who broke into the house. This is someone who may have known her, and that's important when looking for suspects. After the autopsy was performed, the police obtained important information. The medical examiner was able to approximate that Dana had been dead for several hours before police arrived, and had likely died during the night or early morning hours of that day. Detectives began interviewing neighbors, and one of them said he heard a woman's screams coming from around 1 a.m. This provided police with their first idea of the time frame. By 7:30 a.m., Dana was likely dead, as she had failed to show up for work. After determining that Dana was killed between 1 o'clock and 7:30 a.m., the investigation delved deeper into her life in search of suspects. Dana was a mother of triplets, aged 8, who were with their father, her husband Steve, at the time of her death. They had recently separated, and this came to the attention of the police. Dana had started a new life, including new acquaintances, which increased the number of potential suspects among those she might have let into her home. Detectives reached out to her employers to see if Dana had been disturbed by any of the individuals she was dating. The people she worked for as a nanny mentioned a man named Adam who began stalking her. Dana had recently moved and Adam, who worked for a cable company, was doing work at her house. Upon completion of the work, he asked Dana out on a date. Despite her refusal, he never gave up trying to spend the evening with her. Adam wouldn't take no for an answer, and his behavior eventually began to frighten Dana. She spoke of notes on the door, flowers and gifts, and constant messages from him that wouldn't stop. These actions indicated compulsive, controlling, and angry behavior that could lead Adam to consider committing a crime. Police learned that Dana had warned people that if anything happened to her, Adam would be responsible. Thus, Adam found himself in the spotlight as the prime suspect. His possible motive and behavior seemed to be convincing signs of guilt. Against all odds, Adam denied any involvement in Dana's death during his interrogation. The police thoroughly investigated his surroundings. They searched his car and his work locker, but found nothing suspicious. Adam behaved aggressively during the interrogation, insisting on his innocence. He was asked about his whereabouts on the night of the murder. Adam claimed to have stayed at home with friends. A check of his phone records confirmed what he said. Given his confirmed alibi, he was moved down the list of suspects in the investigation, and the police had to redirect their attention to other suspects. Investigators focused on a small but important piece of evidence, a phone number written fluently in pen on Dana's hand. After checking the number, they discovered that it belonged to a 35-year-old man named Julian. The fact that the phone number was written in pen on Dana's hand indicated its importance to her. Detectives tracked down Julian and invited him in for questioning to find out why his number was written on Dana's hand. His reluctance to give a coherent answer raised suspicion, which prompted them to look deeper into his relationship with Dana. Under pressure, Julian admitted that he was in a close relationship with Dana, even though she was dating his best friend Matt. After this revelation, detectives began to wonder if Julian could have been the killer. However, after checking his alibi, it turned out that on the night of the murder, he was at the bar from 10:30 p.m. to 1 a.m., as confirmed by witnesses and the establishment's staff. Thus, his alibi ruled out Julian as the killer. This led the detectives to wonder if Matt, after learning that Dana was secretly seeing his friend, could have committed the crime. Romantic relationships can awaken a storm of feelings in us, and such crimes are often caused by feelings that are out of control. Although it's not obvious to everyone, when it comes to crimes of this nature, the cause is often personal intimacy. This automatically brought Matt, the man Dana was romantically involved with, to the forefront as a suspect. Armed with Julian's information, investigators looked deeper into Dana and Matt's relationship. The asymmetry of feelings was obvious. Matt was burning with passion for Dana, while she, though she'd let him into her life, didn't have such strong feelings. Phone records showed that Dana was actively communicating with Matt on the night of the murder, with calls occurring between 11:30 p.m. and midnight. Dana's friends, in describing Matt, spoke of him as abrasive and rude, describing him as a biker who abused illegal substances and was capable of confronting several men at once, all of which made him an obvious suspect. While investigating Dana Laskowski, investigators discovered that Matt lived near Vancouver, Canada. That didn't make him immune to suspicion. He had the opportunity to drive from his house to Dana's house in a few hours. When questioned, Matt stated that he had planned to meet Dana, but he had been stopped at the border because of problems with his documents, which meant he was not involved in the crime. His alibi checked out. Since Matt was cleared of suspicion, investigators asked him for any information that could help solve Dana's murder. Matt mentioned that he had spoken to Dana on the phone the night of the murder and noticed that she seemed uncomfortable during their conversation, suggesting that perhaps someone was in the house with her. Matt speculated that the mystery person could have been Dana's ex-husband, Steve. Talking to Steve was undoubtedly necessary, as he was the man Dana had spent part of her life with. He was the father of her triplets. A breakup is a difficult experience, and depending on the surrounding circumstances, a breakup can generate rage that can lead to murder. Perhaps after Dana left Steve, he was so angry that he decided to commit a crime. Passion, jealousy, and anger could have driven him to murder, all of which had to be considered. Detectives began to study Steve's identity and found out that he had issued a life insurance policy for Dana, adding financial motives to the list of possible motives for what happened. Steve was taken to the police station for questioning. In talking about his relationship with Dana, Steve appeared unusually withdrawn and aloof, reserved in his emotions. It was as if his feelings were extinguished. During the interview, the detectives noticed another suspicious detail. Steve had abrasions on his knees, similar to those on Dana's knees and elbows. Detectives suspected that an argument may have broken out between the two on the night of the murder. When detectives asked Steve about the abrasions on his knees, he explained that he had received them while playing baseball. However, one of the detectives there, being a true baseball expert, stated that such injuries were not consistent with typical injuries in that sport. After that, Steve became even more nervous. But did he have the opportunity to kill Dana? When asked about his whereabouts on the night of the murder, Steve stated that he was at home, a 5-hour drive from Puyallup. According to him, he put the kids to bed, filled up the car with gas, and drove to a local campground the next morning. His alibi was interesting. The fact that the triplets were absent from Dana's house the night she died could have been a mere coincidence, but it could also mean that Steve had planned the whole thing in advance. The round trip between Steve's house and Dana's house took 10 hours. Investigators seriously considered the possibility that Steve could have put the kids to bed, driven to Puyallup, committed the crime, and driven back. If Steve did go to Dana's house, investigators realized that he would certainly have to stop at a gas station. They retraced his possible route and investigated places where he might have filled up with gasoline. They checked surveillance footage and examined stretches of road where his vehicle might have been seen. Finding no conclusive evidence that Steve had made the trip, investigators eliminated him as a suspect. When all suspects were ruled out, the investigation ran into an insurmountable wall, and it became a source of immense frustration. The investigators had reached the point where no real suspect or plausible explanation for the nature of the crime remained. In the circumstances of this impasse, the position of Dana's body covered with blankets seemed particularly odd, a behavior that clearly indicated the unusual nature of the perpetrator. With this in mind, the police decided to involve the FBI in the investigation. The investigators asked the FBI specialist for help in drawing up a psycho profile of the possible perpetrator, because the local police did not have the necessary experience to recognize such specific signs. The FBI, having thoroughly studied the case, suggested that the crime was committed suddenly, in a fit of rage, and most likely impulsive, indicating a disorganized personality of the perpetrator. Specialists believed that the perpetrator who was in Dana's house that fateful night had no intention of killing her. Most likely, they knew each other, talked, and only then, in a fit of rage, did he attack. The police had turned their eyes to the ex-husband, the boyfriend, and even the stalker, but now the search had to be deepened. Someone was responsible for this crime. It remained to be seen who. With new information from the FBI, investigators decided to widen their search for suspects in the Dana Laskowski case. Now police were looking for someone who might have gone on a rampage if provoked. In search of new evidence, detectives scrutinized the video footage from Dana's funeral. It was necessary to find out not only who was present, but also how people behaved on this day of mourning. From a psychological point of view, it was important to see first who was present, and second, who did not come to Dana's funeral. It is possible that the killer was among these people. Given that most murders are committed by someone the victim knew, the killer could very well have been at the funeral, as ignoring the ceremony would have raised suspicion. But how did he handle such a situation? Was there anything that could have given him away? Looking through the guest book, the police came across an unexpectedly interesting entry. Those close to him expressed grief for the loss, writing that they missed Dana and couldn't believe she was dead. But the entry by Amanda, Dana's niece, particularly stood out. She wrote, "I'm sorry, I wasn't the best niece. I've been free from addiction for 34 days now. It's all thanks to you." Some family members described Amanda as an unruly and unpredictable young woman. What was written indicated that Amanda had gotten rid of her addiction after Dana's death. Moreover, she did so for Dana's sake, which indicated two important things. First of all, it was her love for her aunt. But it also showed that she, for whatever reason, felt guilty about her death. And that was significant because it hinted at the possibility of her involvement in Dana's death. Dana was a very kind, caring person who loved her family. Dana also would frequently let her 17-year-old niece Amanda, who often ran away from home, stay with her in order to keep her out of trouble. Amanda and her friends would visit Dana's house all the time because she was a trusted adult who was always there to support them amidst any trouble at home. The detectives turned their gaze to Amanda. They had arranged a meeting with her to discuss the circumstances surrounding her aunt's death. Amanda revealed that she had been close to Dana, almost like mother and daughter. Her aunt had always been supportive of her and her friends. They were teenagers with unstable home environments who spent time in the park, linking their destiny with alcohol and illegal substances. This entire group had recently graduated from high school, but they had no concrete plans for their lives. Dana was trying to create a safe place for Amanda and her friends where they could come at all hours of the day and night. Therefore, the back door of Dana's house was always left open at night. When investigators asked Amanda about Dana's murder, she provided a list of people who had been in the house, specifically mentioning Zane. She described him as a muscular man with a violent temper. Amanda then made an even more disturbing admission. She recounted how Zane had once assaulted her. He threw her on the couch, becoming physically aggressive. He would try to hit on her in a forceful manner and she would push him away, asking what he was doing. Zane only laughed at this, showing his attractiveness and strength as if he was enjoying what was happening. The detectives decided to get a better look at Zane and run him through the databases. Zane had a criminal history of dealing illegal substances and fighting, enough to make him a suspect. One of the detectives contacted his young informant to learn more about Zane. He met with the informant and discussed Dana's murder, suggesting that Zane was a suitable suspect. However, the informant stated with certainty that it wasn't Zane who had killed Dana. The killer was Emily, a young woman from Amanda's entourage. Emily Lauenborg was 17 years old, lived near Dana's house, and used illegal substances. Amanda and Emily were very close. Perhaps they were even best friends. The detective, upon hearing the story, began to doubt its veracity. He couldn't believe that Emily, a frail girl 5 feet 2 inches tall, could strangle a 36-year-old mother of 3. To which the informant replied that she was no longer the fragile girl she once was. She had grown up and become muscular. She was nicknamed the Mutant because she liked to wrestle guys. Emily wasn't the typical suspect, but during the investigation, it was revealed that among the challenging teens, Emily showed up as the strongest. She won at arm wrestling and even regular wrestling, impressing everyone, including the guys, with her physical strength. The detectives brought Emily to the station for questioning about her possible involvement in Dana's murder. Emily put her hands on the table, her head thrown back, her eyes darting frantically from side to side. Then she leaned forward furiously, assuring her that she had been slandered. The police questioned Emily about her whereabouts at the time of Dana's murder. Emily, along with Amanda, claimed to have been at the party when the crime occurred. However, the police were able to find out that Amanda and Emily left the party around midnight. It followed that they could have gotten to Dana's house by 1 o'clock in the morning. Everything pointed to the fact that they were hiding something and probably had something to do with the crime. But what had really happened? Could Emily have been the killer? Due to growing circumstantial evidence against Emily, the police obtained a search warrant for the room she was renting. Among the items seized was her personal diary. It contained the typical entries of a 17-year-old girl, but its contents soon revealed unexpected details. One of the entries was a wish list, including a wish to kill someone and go unpunished. In another entry, Emily is angry with Amanda and writes that she wants to strangle Amanda the way she strangled her aunt. This shocking revelation confirmed Emily's guilt. The diaries detailed the commission of the murder, the strangling of Dana, and the desire to possibly strangle Amanda in the same manner. Importantly, By the time detectives found Emily's diary, they had not publicized the information that Dana had died of strangulation. This too indicated that Emily was responsible for what happened to Dana. Detectives questioned Amanda again, this time accusing her of lying about the night her aunt was murdered. They wondered why she misled everyone. After all, she claimed she wasn't there. Under pressure, Amanda couldn't take it anymore and told the detectives everything she knew. Already before they reached Dana's house, Emily said she wanted some money. As they entered the living room, Dana heard a noise and woke up. She was surprised to see them. They told Dana that they needed money, but Dana replied that she didn't have any cash. But Emily was not satisfied with that answer and again asked Dana to give her some money. When Dana asked them to leave, she lightly nudged Emily towards the exit. However, Emily didn't like it and she wasn't going to stand for it. She went on a rampage and attacked Dana and strangled her in front of Amanda. Amanda screamed and told her to stop, but Emily wouldn't listen to her. Amanda watched Emily kill her aunt and took no action, which either indicates her fear of Emily or indicates that it happened so quickly that she probably didn't even realize what she was witnessing. The scream heard by a neighbor at 1 a.m. when Dana was killed was actually Amanda's scream, not Dana's. Emily laid Dana's body on the couch and covered it with a blanket. They took the small amount of money that Dana had. Before leaving, Emily paused for a moment to retrieve one item from Dana's closet, a black shirt. Emily showed up at Dana's funeral wearing that very shirt. It was her show of strength and dominance. The question plaguing the investigators was motive. Emily had told her friends that Amanda kept leaving her for her aunt, and it made her angry. Emily may have killed Dana to completely possess Amanda, as they were very close. Despite her role in Dana's murder, Amanda was offered a plea bargain and would not face jail time. They discussed at length what to do with Amanda, but investigators felt she was needed as a witness since she had seen the murder. If Amanda was charged with a crime, she would have the right to remain silent. So she became a witness and provided information about what happened that fateful night. It was the crucial information authorities needed. Still, prosecutors doubted they could prove Emily's guilt to a jury due to her inconspicuous physical size, and instead let her plead guilty to the lesser charge of manslaughter. She was found guilty and sentenced to 6.5 years in prison. After serving 5.5 years, Emily Lauenborg was released in 2008. She returned to Puyallup, changed her name, married and had children. The fact that Emily is now walking around free is sure to cause concern among locals. She'd already killed once and never regretted it. At the funeral, she was wearing the victim's clothes, like serial killers who wear souvenirs of their crimes. In this video, we take a look at the events that took place in the American state of Tennessee. On September 2, 2022, 34-year-old Eliza Fletcher, a kindergarten teacher and mother of 2 children, left her home in Memphis for a morning jog. Eliza did not return home, and after police were notified of her disappearance, an investigation was launched that caused a large public outcry.
Eliza Fletcher.
Eliza Fletcher.
Eliza Fletcher.
Eliza Fletcher.
Give Eliza Fletcher.
Eliza Fletcher.
Of Memphis mother and teacher Eliza Fletcher.
The case was brought to a close a few days ago. Eliza Welford Fletcher was born on November 9, 1987, in Memphis, Tennessee. Following graduation from the Hutchison School in 2006, Eliza played soccer for the University of Memphis and later completed her undergraduate education at Baylor University. She received a master's degree in teaching from Belmont University. She devoted her work and boundless childlike energy to her students at Promise Academy and later her junior kindergarten students at St. Mary's Episcopal School. As with everything Eliza took on, she nurtured and cared for her students with her whole heart. A strong believer in the importance of personal growth, she was not afraid to be vulnerable. To the contrary, she embraced it. A born athlete, Eliza's passion for sports extended from childhood teams to collegiate competition to excellence in marathons in adulthood. She found great joy in her morning runs with friends. She channeled her competitive nature into enthusiastic participation in all that she undertook. Eliza was an accomplished runner who completed the St. Jude Marathon in Memphis with a time of 3 hours, 26 minutes and 9 seconds, qualifying her for the Boston Marathon, a prestigious event among marathon runners. Above all else, Eliza's most cherished role was that of wife and mother. She first met her husband, Richard James Fletcher, at Second Presbyterian Church. They were married March 8, 2014. The couple had 2 sons. On Friday, September 2, 2022, Eliza started her day the way she started many other days, with a morning run. She left the house at about 4 a.m. Eliza's family became concerned when she did not return from her jog at the expected time. Her husband, Richard, reported her missing around 7:45 a.m. after realizing that she had not returned home and that she was not answering phone calls or texts. Police immediately launched an investigation. First of all, the investigators talked to all members of Eliza's family. They needed to reconstruct the chronology of events leading up to her disappearance, and they also needed to make sure that there were no contradictions in the testimony of the family members. Authorities quickly ruled out the possibility that Eliza's husband or any other member of her family was involved in the disappearance. After figuring out which route Eliza was running, investigators retraced her path and began collecting surveillance footage. They released a still image of Eliza. Her description is 5 foot 6 inches tall, 137 pounds, with blonde hair and green eyes. She was last seen wearing a pink jogging top and purple-blue running shorts and had her hair in a bun. That same day, after reviewing other surveillance footage, investigators determined that Eliza had been abducted near the University of Memphis. She often jogged in the area and never had any personal safety issues. But this time, according to police, Eliza was abducted by a man, forced her into his vehicle and drove away. The suspect was in a dark-colored SUV and was traveling westbound on Central Avenue. Eliza's cell phone was found smashed. The phone and a water bottle were found near where she was abducted. Police released an image of the SUV and asked anyone with any information that could help the investigation to contact police. Authorities later released some details about the kidnapping. Here's what the police report says about it. Security video from the scene showed a black GMC Terrain passing and then waiting for the victim to run by, according to the document. A male exited the car, ran toward Fletcher, and forced her into the passenger seat. During this abduction, there appeared to be a struggle. The Champion Slide sandals were found in this area. The vehicle then sat in the parking lot with the victim inside for approximately 4 minutes before it drove off. Sandals found at the scene were sent to a lab, where experts were to test them for a sample of the perpetrator's DNA. The day after the abduction, September 3rd, Eliza's family issued a statement and offered a $50,000 reward for information that would help bring Eliza home.
My name is Mike Keeney, and I am the uncle of Liza Fletcher. On behalf of Liza's family, her husband Richie, her children, her mom Adele, her father Beasley, her brother Gil, and all the members of her family, we want to make a brief statement. We want to start by thanking everyone for their prayers and outpouring of support. Liza has touched the hearts of many people, and it shows. We want to thank the Memphis Police Department, Shelby County Sheriff Department, TBI, FBI, and all of the other law enforcement agencies who are working tirelessly to find Liza. The family has met with police, and we have shared with them all the information we know. More than anything, we want to see Liza returned home safely. The family has offered a reward for any information that leads to her safe return. We believe someone knows what happened and can help. If you have any information on this crime or Liza's location, call the police at 901.
Meanwhile, police were searching for the dark SUV. They found some more surveillance footage, and later some of the footage was released to the public. This footage, according to the police statement, shows the suspect in the kidnapping of Eliza Fletcher cleaning the interior of his car. From the statement, it can be understood that at this point, Eliza was no longer in the kidnapper's vehicle, but somewhere else. Authorities seized a trash can where the suspect had dumped the products he used to clean the interior of the car. They could be a key piece of evidence. On the same day, September 3rd, Memphis police announced that a vehicle of interest had been located, and they had detained its driver for questioning. The sandals that the perpetrator lost during Eliza Fletcher's abduction were the source of the DNA sample. When forensics entered the DNA profile into the database, they got a name. 38-year-old Cleotha Abston was the man who abducted Eliza. He had a criminal record and was released from prison about 2 years ago. Cellular records obtained by investigators are alleged to have determined that Abston's cell phone was near the site where Fletcher was forced into the vehicle. Abston was previously sentenced to 24 years in prison after pleading guilty to kidnapping a man named Kemper Durand on May 26, 2000. Abston was a teenager at the time. Court documents state that Abston kidnapped Durand at gunpoint and forced him into the trunk of a car. He then forced Durand to withdraw money from an ATM. Durand escaped when he got the attention of a Memphis Housing Authority guard while he was withdrawing the cash. In a victim impact statement, Durand said he felt extremely lucky that I was able to escape from the custody of Cleotha Abston. I had been taken from the trunk of my car, where he and his co-defendant had placed me for a number of hours, and made to drive to the MAPCO station. The purpose was that I was to use my ATM card to get cash for Cleotha Abston. It was very fortunate that an armed, uniformed Memphis Housing Authority guard happened to come into the MAPCO station, he wrote in the statement. It is quite likely that I would have been killed had I not escaped. Durand, a criminal defense lawyer who died in 2013, said he believed that Abston felt absolutely no remorse. The court documents also show that Abston had a lengthy criminal record dating to 1995. The charges included theft, aggravated assault, evading arrest, and a rape charge in 1998. Abston was released from the Tennessee Department of Correction in November 2020. Although the kidnapper was arrested, Eliza Fletcher's whereabouts remained unknown because Abston remained silent. Evidence found in his car unfortunately indicated that Eliza was no longer alive. Although Abston had thoroughly cleaned the interior of his SUV, forensics found traces of Eliza's blood. Abston was charged with kidnapping and tampering with evidence. He was also charged with unrelated offenses of identity theft, theft of property, and credit card fraud, police said. At the time of arraignment, the judge set bail at $500,000. Abston told the judge he couldn't afford a lawyer, and a public defender was appointed. Meanwhile, police were doing their best to find Eliza. She was abducted on the morning of Friday, September 2nd. On Monday, September 5th, 2022, authorities held a press conference to confirm the worst fears for those worried about Eliza Fletcher's fate.
Good morning. Today is a very sad day in the city of Memphis. First, I'd like to express our sincere condolences to the family, friends, and numerous others who have been impacted by the tragic and heinous kidnapping of Eliza Fletcher. Yesterday evening, September 5th, at approximately 5:07 p.m., the Memphis Police Department and other law enforcement partners discovered the remains of a human body, in the rear of a vacant duplex apartment at the 1600 block of Victor Street. At that time, it was believed the unidentified body could possibly be the remains of kidnapping victim Eliza Fletcher. Further forensic investigation by the MPD traffic unit positively identified the body was, in fact, Eliza Fletcher. This finding marked the culmination of a 4-day intensive investigation incorporating a robust search and rescue effort and the timely arrest of suspect Cleotha Abston on September 3rd, the day following the kidnapping.
Eliza's body was found in the grass near this abandoned house on Victor Street. Tire tracks were found in the driveway that matched the tires on Abston's car. Here's what this place looks like on Google Maps. However, news reports show that at the time of the crime, this abandoned house was surrounded by tall grass.
Well, people we talk to believe these neglected properties can draw crime. Take a look here. You can see just how high this grass is in some parts right in front of this house. In some areas, 7 feet tall or even higher. And people we talk to, they want it gone.
In some places, the grass was as tall as a man, and it was a good place to hide the evidence of the crime. After Eliza's body was found here, journalists began asking locals if they had seen anything suspicious. Some of the people interviewed by the journalists said that even before Eliza's body was found, they repeatedly called the city hall and asked for the grass to be mowed, but the city authorities did not take any action. After Eliza's body was found, Abston was charged with additional charges, including first-degree murder and first-degree murder in the perpetration of kidnapping. The judge revoked the $500,000 bail set earlier when Abston was originally charged. The judge also ruled the court will recognize the suspect's legal surname as Henderson. Since even the prosecutor's reports list his name as Cleotha Abston, I will hereinafter refer to this man as Cleotha Abston. I just want to warn you that some sources list him as Cleotha Henderson. After proceeding, Shelby County District Attorney Steve Mulroy deflected a reporter's question about what punishment he'd pursue if Abston is convicted. A first-degree murder conviction carries sentences of life in prison with or without parole, or the death penalty. It is premature for us to discuss right now what punishment we're going to seek, Mulroy said, outside the courtroom. Eliza's tragic death came as a shock to her family and all who knew her. Hundreds of people came to the funeral ceremony held on September 10, 2022, 5 days after the police announced the discovery of the body. The ceremony was held in the same church where Eliza had married 8 years earlier. The death of a loved one is something no one is ready for, but finding out that they were murdered after abduction is a terrifying feeling. It takes a toll on people's mental health as they struggle to accept the heartbreaking truth. Now it's time to remember and celebrate how special she was and to support those who cared so much for her. We appreciate all the expressions of love and concern we have received. We are grateful beyond measure to local, state, and federal law enforcement for their tireless efforts to find Eliza and to bring justice to the person responsible for this horrible crime, Eliza's family said. We are heartbroken and devastated by this senseless loss. Eliza was such a joy to so many. Her family, friends, colleagues, students, parents, members of her Second Presbyterian Church congregation, and everyone who knew her, the statement reads. At St. Mary's Episcopal School, the faculty and staff started the day in chapel and lit candles in Eliza's memory, the school said in a Facebook post. On September 9, 2022, hundreds of people gathered to complete the marathon that Eliza had left unfinished. They started running at 4:20 a.m. to honor Eliza, who was abducted around the same time. Event organizer Danielle Heineman said, "We're just here today to run in honor of Eliza, and also to show that women in this city have a right to run at 4 o'clock in the morning, or 10 at night, or any time of the day." In her memory, Eliza's supporters wore bright-colored clothes to walk, jog, and run. They believed women weren't obliged to cover their bodies entirely and had the right to go out whenever they wanted. According to an autopsy report, the 34-year-old teacher and mother of 2 died from a single gunshot wound to the head. There are 2 semicircular defects to the skull consistent with a single gunshot to the head, with the bullet traveling in a posterior to anterior, back to front, and right to left direction, the report said. Although no projectile was recovered from her body, a shell casing was found near where her body was discovered. In addition to the gunshot wound, Eliza suffered blunt force injuries, including bruises on her right thigh and jaw fractures. These injuries were consistent with blunt force trauma, but did not indicate any overt evidence of sexual assault. As authorities prepared for the trial, it was revealed that Cleotha Abston had assaulted another woman the year before he kidnapped Eliza. Abston could have been arrested, thus preventing the attack on Eliza Fletcher, but unfortunately, due to poor funding, the system failed, and Abston remained at large. The incident in question occurred on September 21, 2021. The woman, whose name is Alicia Franklin, went to the police and reported that she and Abston met on a dating app in 2021 and agreed to have dinner. They had discussed exchanging love for money beforehand, but had no plans to make intimate contact that very night. According to Alicia Franklin, when she arrived at Abstin's apartment, he put a gun to her neck and forced her into his car, where he forced her to please him even though she was against it. After Abstin let her go, Alicia contacted police. Police reports said there were no visible injuries on her body, but samples of male DNA were found. How long do you think it took to analyze these DNA samples? The incident occurred on September 21, 2021, and the test results came back on September 5, 2022, which is almost a year later. By that time, Abstin had been arrested for the murder of Eliza Fletcher. The news quickly sparked outrage among state leaders and victim advocates, demanding that officials fix how the state processes assault kits. Tennessee Governor Bill Lee expressed regrets and said authorities would expedite additional funds to hire 25 additional staff at the forensic lab to speed up the process of testing samples. While there is absolutely more to do, I am pleased that we are able to take this additional step towards eliminating this backlog. We have to get these violent criminals off the streets and keep them off, said Senate Speaker Randy McNally. Memphis Mayor Jim Strickland has come out in defense of the Memphis Police Department and its actions. When asked if MPD botched the investigation, Strickland said, "I don't know the details. It's an active investigation. The mayor should not get down in the weeds on the investigation." Cleotha Abstin was eventually indicted in the case just days after he was arrested in the death of Eliza Fletcher. Alicia Franklin is suing the city of Memphis, accusing the Memphis Police Department of failing to investigate what happened to her properly and with due diligence. She stated that she had suffered physical and emotional injuries that required ongoing medical and psychiatric treatment. She's seeking unspecified damages. The lawsuit also claims investigators did not take physical evidence from the crime scene when they arrived. Alicia Franklin also sued the Lakes at Ridgeway. The woman claimed the apartment complex had no security, allowing Abstin to lead her to an empty apartment and assault her. In that lawsuit, she is seeking $2 million in damages. In that lawsuit, she hinted that the attack on her was not the first crime committed in that empty apartment. The apartment that Abstin used to lure plaintiff away from her car was vacant and was accessible for Abstin to use for criminal activity, the lawsuit read. The woman also asserted in the court filing that Henderson had approached other women at the complex and made lewd and inappropriate comments to them, but the property managers did nothing to ask Abstin to leave. On April 12, 2024, Cleotha Abstin was found guilty in the Alicia Franklin case. On May 17, 2024, he waived his right to a sentencing hearing and agreed to a maximum sentence of 8 decades behind bars on all counts. The sentence breaks down to 40 years for the 20 years for the kidnapping, and 20 years for the gun charge, all to run consecutively. Judge Lee Coffey said when determining that the sentence would run consecutively for the counts, he took into account Abstin's long criminal history and several disciplinary incidents while he has been in custody, including indecent exposures and possessing drugs and weapons. By waiving the sentencing hearing, the judge said Abstin will not be able to appeal his sentence, but can still appeal the trial and verdict itself in the Franklin case. This week, on Monday, October 28, 2024, it was revealed that Cleotha Abstin was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole in the Eliza Fletcher case. Here's what the statement released by the district attorney's office said. Today, the man accused in the brutal abduction and murder of Memphis schoolteacher and mother of 2, Eliza Fletcher, pled guilty to multiple charges, including first-degree murder, aggravated kidnapping, and tampering with evidence. Cleotha Abstin was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, bringing a formal end to a case that has deeply shaken the community. The resolution was made with the support of Mrs. Fletcher's family. Today's agreement achieves finality for the family. The defendant gives up his right to appeal so there won't be years and decades of appeals. It also helps the community because this dangerous person will never again walk our streets. He will die in prison. Uni Ganguly, A lawyer for Abston told the New York Times he advised Abston to accept the plea deal due to overwhelming evidence against him. Ganguly told the Times a jury likely would have sentenced Abston to death. District Attorney Steve Mulroy read a statement from Fletcher's family addressed directly to Abston. "We have no idea what happened to you to turn you into someone so filled with a desire to hurt people. Whatever it was, it does not excuse or explain what you have done. You have changed our lives forever, and nothing will ever be the same. Your actions were evil. There is no other word for it. You murdered Liza, even though she did nothing to deserve it. She did not hurt you. In fact, she would have been the first to help if you needed it." In this video, we take a look at events that took place in 2003. When Sandy Razzo, 37, arrived home after a night shift at a bar, she pulled into the garage and was about to get out of the car. But at that moment, her boyfriend, who was sleeping on the second floor, heard some loud pops. He went down to the garage, and after what he saw, he called 911. The case was shrouded in darkness, with several suspects. It appeared to be a crime of passion, driven by a perverse desire to possess and control. Pinellas Park, a quaint city on the outskirts of Tampa, Florida, is known for its picturesque beaches and lush landscapes. The community is a mix of wealthy residents and working-class people. While crime in the area is not unheard of, it tends to be more of a petty nature, drunk driving and auto theft being the most common offenses. However, in 2003, an event occurred here that left locals in fear. It was the day after the 4th of July Saturday night, and neighbors reported hearing pops just after 11 o'clock. It was the 4th of July weekend, and so it was expected that fireworks and other sounds would be heard for a couple of days. However, the sounds didn't cause anyone much concern until one local resident discovered that the pops were not celebratory. Troy Edwards called 911 and reported that he heard something he thought sounded like firecrackers popping. When he went outside to find the source of the noise, he noticed the garage door was open and saw his girlfriend Sandy bleeding in her car. Rescue workers quickly arrived on the scene, followed by detectives. The car was parked in the garage, Sandy's body was inside, and there was a large amount of blood and broken glass all around. She suffered 8 separate gunshot wounds to various parts of her body, including her head. Initial examination of the crime scene revealed that it was the perpetrator who used a .22 caliber weapon. It appeared that Sandy was ambushed by someone waiting for her or following her to her garage. She was rushed to the hospital, but unfortunately passed away. Sandy was left with a daughter who was with her father at the time of the crime. The ambush, set up in her own garage as she was returning home from work, shocked the public. Although her purse and wallet were untouched, detectives did not believe Sandy's death was accidental. The premeditated nature of the attack with multiple gunshots suggested a personal vendetta rather than a simple random crime. The brutal nature of the attack indicated that Sandy herself was the target, not material gain. At the beginning of the investigation, the detectives' main task was to question Sandy's boyfriend, Troy. It is not uncommon in murder cases for suspicion to fall on the victim's loved ones or those who know the victim well. Troy, being close to Sandy, may have had important information. When the police first tried to talk to him, he was nowhere to be found. He had left the scene, which struck the detectives as odd. It was later discovered that Troy had headed to the hospital, but his behavior was suspicious because he had locked up the house before leaving. This action seemed odd due to the presence of numerous police officers who were still doing their job. Why was he persistently preventing access to the house? What was he trying to hide? Detectives sought to get to the bottom of these questions, although his actions could have been the reaction of a confused or frightened man. Detectives called Troy in for questioning. He seemed upset, which was expected. He claimed that the last time he saw Sandy was when she left for work. Due to their mismatched work schedules, Troy worked during the day and Sandy worked at night. Troy explained that on the morning of July 5th, he left for work at 5 a.m. while Sandy was still asleep. When he got home at 2 p.m., he and Sandy talked briefly, after which she went to her job as a bartender at the popular Green Iguana Bar in Tampa. She was supposed to finish around 11 p.m. that night. Troy mentioned that he heard her car pull up, and shortly after 11 p.m., around 11:10, he heard what he thought were clappers. He went to the garage to check on Sandy, where he found her unconscious with numerous wounds. He tried to bring her to her senses, but was unable to do so and called 911. During the interrogation, Troy was asked about his relationship with Sandy. He described their connection as romantic, expressing his deep love for her. He spoke well of Sandy, mentioning her beauty and the wonderful daughter she had. He even mentioned plans to marry Sandy. When Troy was asked about Sandy's possible enemies, he shared a disturbing detail. She warned him that if anything bad happened to her, Tracy Humphrey would be responsible. According to him, the man was Sandy's ex-boyfriend and posed a danger because after breaking up with Sandy, Tracy had assaulted her. Despite Troy's testimony, the police found no record of Tracy Humphrey in criminal databases, raising questions about the credibility of Troy's words. During the interview, investigators noticed cuts on Troy's hands, legs, and feet. He explained that he had cut himself on broken glass while trying to pull Sandy out of the car. This called Troy's honesty into question and gave rise to speculation about the possibility of his involvement in the incident. The mention of Tracy Humphrey seemed like a ploy to divert attention away from the true culprit. Nevertheless, Tracy Humphrey remained an important figure in the case, but Troy could not be ruled out as a suspect either. In investigating Sandy Razzo's murder, detectives reached out to her friends and family in an effort to reconstruct the chronology of the last hours of her life. They made inquiries about Sandy's relationship with Jesse, the father of her daughter. There were signs of tension in their relationship, possibly related to child custody issues. At the time of Sandy's death, her daughter was living with her father in Alabama. Jesse was financially supporting his daughter and possibly seeking sole custody. This raised suspicions about his involvement in Sandy's murder, as child custody disputes can sometimes lead to criminal behavior. To gather more information, detectives traveled to Alabama and spoke with Jesse. During the conversation, Jesse denied any involvement in Sandy's death. Detectives decided to bring him in for questioning at the local police station. At the station, Jesse continued to insist on his innocence, claiming that Sandy had played a significant role in their daughter's life and that he had no reason to want the mother of their child dead. He was asked about where he was on the evening of July 5th when the crime was committed. Jesse claimed that he was at home that evening watching movies with his daughter and girlfriend when he received a phone call around 1 a.m., informing him of Sandy's tragic death. To confirm Jesse's alibi, investigators gathered more information, including DNA samples, fingerprints, and his cell phone records. Jesse's cell phone records indicated that he was outside of Florida when the crime was committed. Now that Jesse has been cleared of suspicion, detectives are focusing their attention on the Green Iguana, where Sandy was working the night of her murder. The Green Iguana is a popular bar known for its lively nightlife. Sandy often socialized with the regulars. Investigators interviewed all of her co-workers, especially those who had worked with her the night of the crime, looking for new leads. The people she worked with were shocked and angry when they found out what had happened to Sandy. Everyone who knew her liked her, so they were deeply upset by the news of her death. On the evening of the incident, none of the co-workers noticed anything unusual inside the bar. Sandy left work around 10:45 p.m., and a witness saw her leaving the parking lot shortly thereafter. To piece together the chronology of Sandy's last day, investigators traced her path from work to her home, which took approximately 25 minutes. This meant she should have arrived home around 11:10 p.m. This chronology suggested that Sandy went straight home after leaving work. Investigators began questioning Sandy's co-workers about her personal life. While Troy, the man she lived with, described their relationship as solid, her co-workers painted a different picture. They mentioned that Sandy sometimes felt like she was just Troy's roommate rather than a girlfriend. This information suggested that Sandy may have considered breaking up with Troy. The detectives began to focus on Troy again as it became apparent that he was telling one story while Sandy's friends and co-workers were telling another. Colleagues at the Green Iguana mentioned that Sandy had planned to discuss with Troy the possibility of dating other people. Troy's feelings may have been hurt, causing him to act irrationally and hurt Sandy. Sandy was grateful for the stability Troy provided, but it seems she didn't love him as much as he wanted her to. This unrequited love could have been the motive for the crime. A classic case of crime of passion where the perpetrator believes, if I can't have you, no one can. When detectives questioned Troy again, he appeared distraught, but cooperated with the investigation. However, it is not uncommon for suspects to feign innocence and cooperate fully with the police in an attempt to deflect suspicion. With Troy now at the center of the investigation, the detectives diligently searched for any evidence linking him to Sandy's murder. They thoroughly searched both Troy's car and his home, but found no weapons or any other items that raised suspicion. The detectives then talked to Troy about his relationship with Sandy, informing him that her co-workers had painted a far from perfect picture. Troy was visibly shocked by the accusations. He believed that their relationship was more serious and was unaware of Sandy's true feelings. Even though Sandy may have been planning to leave him, Troy insisted that his love for her remained unchanged. To corroborate Troy's story, detectives reviewed the chronology of events. Establishing a clear timeline was critical. They were able to confirm that Sandy arrived home around 11:10 p.m., which matched Troy's description of hearing gunshots, finding Sandy in the garage, and calling 911. Troy's behavior seemed consistent with that of a man who witnessed the tragic death of his loved one. After a thorough investigation, law enforcement ruled Troy out as a suspect in the crime. After that, it seemed like the investigation had reached a dead end. Who else could have had the motivation to commit such a heinous act? Who would want to harm Sandy, who was just trying to save money and build her life? Fortunately, the detectives got some unexpected help when Troy discovered a folder belonging to Sandy in his home. Troy believed the folder contained important information, and he was right. The folder was filled with Sandy's handwritten notes detailing her upcoming trial against a man she accused of assault and unlawful imprisonment. Sandy was to testify in a Tampa courtroom against a man named Timothy Humphrey. The trial was scheduled to take place in August, just a month after Sandy's murder. Troy had previously told police that Sandy's ex-boyfriend's name was Tracy Humphrey. Documentation in the file revealed that his real name was Timothy. This yielded important information, including his date of birth and other personal details that were the first clue to solving the case. There was no information about Tracy Humphrey in the databases, but there was a lot of information about Timothy Humphrey. Further investigation revealed that Timothy Humphrey, better known as Tracy Humphrey, had a disturbing history of assaulting women. In fact, he served an 8-year prison sentence for these crimes. The most disturbing revelation was that Tracy had kidnapped Sandy, held her captive, and over the course of several days repeatedly forced Sandy to please him. Fearing for her life, Sandy managed to escape and was found naked and beaten by a sheriff's deputy. Tracy threatened to kill her if she reported the assault, as he was facing jail time for his actions. Despite her fear, Sandy was willing to testify against Tracy in court. Investigators had strong evidence, including DNA, photographs, and Sandy's testimony. However, everything in this case depended on Sandy's testimony. If she couldn't testify, the charges would likely be dropped. This gave Tracy a strong motive to silence her, so he became the prime suspect in the investigation. A handwritten note left by Sandy directly identified Tracy as a potential threat. Armed with this new information, detectives located Tracy at a gym in the neighboring city of Brandon, where he resided and worked as a personal fitness trainer. Known for his strong build and commitment to fitness, Tracy was often referred to as Mr. Clean, due to his bald head, earring in his ear, and commanding appearance. While talking to detectives, Tracy seemed surprised to learn of Sandy's murder, but his evasive demeanor raised suspicions. When asked about his relationship with Sandy, Tracy was defensive and refused to answer further questions without his attorney present. Detectives noticed that Tracy was wearing a wedding ring, indicating that he must have gotten married not too long ago, as there was no record of his marriage in the databases. Turns out he married a woman named Ashley Laney. Ashley was considerably younger than Tracy. He was 39, while she was only 20. Detectives were hoping Tracy's new wife would provide more information, so they went to their home to talk to her. Upon entering the home, detectives noticed that Ashley was starting to get nervous. However, she revealed that she and Tracy were married on July 4th. It was an amazing coincidence because the day after their wedding, July 5th, Sandy Razzo was murdered. Under Florida law, spouses cannot be compelled to testify against each other in criminal cases. This fact made detectives suspicious of the timing of Ashley and Tracy's marriage. They found the timing of the marriage to be a compelling and troubling signal. When Ashley was asked about Tracy's whereabouts on the night of the murder, she stated that she knew nothing about the crime. During her conversation with detectives, Ashley willingly provided her alibi for the night of Sandy's murder. She stated that on the night of the murder, at 11 p.m., she and Tracy were at home watching a movie and eating pizza. Ashley mentioned that their friend Toby White had also visited their home that evening. However, the conversation took an unexpected turn when Ashley received a call from her attorney. Tracy contacted the lawyer and told him to call Ashley and explain to her how she should behave if she was contacted by detectives. Then something else strange happened. To everyone's surprise, Tracy returned home and forbade Ashley from answering the detectives' questions. His demeanor, body language, and facial expressions indicated anger and frustration. This planted a suspicion in the minds of the detectives that there may have been a conspiracy to cover up the truth about Sandy Razzo's murder, and Tracy may have been involved. Although Ashley had gone silent, the detectives had an important new lead. The alibi provided by Ashley and Tracy Humphrey for the night of Sandy Razzo's murder was that they had ordered pizza. Following this lead, the detectives visited the pizza parlor, found the delivery driver, and picked up the receipt. The pizza was ordered using Tracy's cell phone at 10:49 p.m. on July 5th. The pizza was delivered 15 minutes afterward. The pizza delivery driver quickly recalled that night, mentioning that the bald, large guy had given him a $20 tip for a $12 pizza. Since Tracy's home was a 40-minute drive from the crime scene, detectives concluded that he could not have been the killer. This discovery was a disappointment to the detectives as they suspected Tracy. The pieces of the puzzle did not fit together the way they expected. A setback like the one associated with a confirmed alibi can be discouraging. However, in this particular situation, he decided to look into Ashley's involvement in what happened to Sandy. During further investigation, the detectives uncovered an intriguing incident. Ashley was a good student and a person of good behavior with no criminal record. However, shortly before Sandy's death, she reported her car stolen. Ironically, her car was later found on a street in Tampa, completely burned out. The state fire marshal's office concluded that the car had been intentionally set on fire. Police investigated the arson and discovered that on the same day Ashley's car was set on fire, she had visited a shooting range in the Tampa area. It turned out that Ashley Humphrey had been at the range with Tracy Humphrey, where she was learning to shoot a .22 caliber weapon. This information was crucial because the gun that killed Sandy was also a .22 caliber. Detectives began to correlate all of the information they received and delve deeper into Ashley's involvement in Sandy's murder. They talked to her family to gather more information. Ashley's stepfather told detectives that he owned a .22 caliber handgun and had loaned it to Ashley because she wanted to learn how to shoot. He asked for the gun back, but Ashley did not return it. When detectives spoke to Ashley's mother, they no longer had any doubt that they were taking the investigation in the right direction. The mother said Ashley had informed her that Sandy had been shot 8 times. This detail was significant because it had not been reported in the media, indicating that only law enforcement and the shooter would have been privy to this information. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, indicating Ashley's involvement in the crime. However, the motive for Sandy's murder remained unclear, except for a potential connection to Tracy. By obtaining the phone records of Tracy Humphrey and Ashley Humphrey, investigators were able to pinpoint the exact location of Tracy's phone at the time of the crime. The phone tower data showed that his phone was located near his residence in Brandon. Although the records confirmed Tracy's alibi, they contradicted Ashley's statement that she had been home all night. Her phone was active outside the Green Iguana around 4:30 p.m. and she called Tracy several times. Later, around 10:45 p.m., her phone was tracked near Sandy's house. The evidence strongly suggested Ashley's involvement in the crime. Ashley was now the prime suspect. However, detectives suspected that she wasn't acting alone. The phone records also pointed to Tracy's involvement in the crime, as he had a motive to harm Sandy. The only question now was what role each of them had played in the crime. Looking for more evidence, detectives turned their attention to Toby White, a friend who had visited Tracy and Ashley's home the night Sandy Razzo was murdered. Detectives called her in for questioning. Turns out Toby was a client of Tracy Humphrey. She thought Tracy was a good trainer. When Toby was asked about her whereabouts on the evening of July 5th, she initially corroborated Tracy's account, claiming she had been at his house from 9:30 p.m. to midnight, even mentioning the pizza delivery they had ordered. However, upon further examination of cell phone records, it became clear that Toby was not present in the house during that time. Toby was confronted with inconsistencies in her testimony. Perjury is an offense that can result in jail time. Faced with the possibility of criminal charges, Toby recanted her original statement and told the truth. She informed detectives that she had not seen Ashley or Tracy Humphrey that evening, and provided a false alibi at Tracy's request. In retrospect, Toby realized that Tracy and Ashley had deceived her about their involvement in the murder. On December 18, 2003, Ashley Humphrey was arrested for the first-degree murder of Sandy Razzo. Tracy Humphrey, a convicted felon, was prohibited from possessing or using firearms, making it impossible for him to handle firearms at a firing range. As a result, Tracy was arrested on these charges and held in custody to make sure he could not influence Ashley. Because Ashley was in custody and away from Tracy, detectives hoped she would provide more information about the crime, but she remained silent. Fear of Tracy's potential influence over her was a serious concern given his history of abuse. Detectives dug deeper into Tracy's past in hopes of uncovering information that might get Ashley to talk. They were able to find information that Tracy had been cheating on Ashley, and not just with women. As Ashley began to piece together the truth, she realized that her entire relationship, including her marriage, had been built on deception and lies. Sitting in jail, Ashley couldn't escape the question of whether she had been manipulated all along. The shocking revelation that the man she'd committed a crime for, the man she was willing to spend a lifetime in prison for, was cheating on her forced Ashley to change tactics. Feeling betrayed, Ashley confessed to Sandy's murder and provided detectives with crucial information about the location of the murder weapon. The gun was recovered in Northeast Hillsborough County. As Ashley continued to speak with investigators, she uncovered increasingly disturbing details. Tracy had manipulated her from the beginning, convincing her that he loved her, and that in order for them to have a future together, Sandy had to be eliminated. According to Tracy, he had been falsely accused and was facing jail time if Sandy testified in court. Ashley also confessed to a previous attempt on Sandy's life that had occurred weeks before the fatal incident. The revelation of these dark truths painted a chilling picture of manipulation, deception, and betrayal. Ashley had originally planned to shoot Sandy as she left the bar. She sat in her car in the parking lot, waiting for Sandy to finish her shift and walk out into the parking lot to drive home. Ashley waited until Sandy came out of the bar and pulled the trigger. The problem for Ashley was that she didn't hit Sandy, she shot the mirror on her own car. This incident left behind compromising evidence. To eliminate the evidence, Ashley and Tracy drove the car to a vacant lot and set it on fire. As more and more evidence linking Tracy to the crime emerged, law enforcement became more confident in their ability to charge him with murder. Ashley was just a pawn in Tracy's scheme. He manipulated her into carrying out his plan to eliminate Sandy. Tracy Humphrey was the mastermind behind the tragic events that unfolded. Without his influence, Sandy would still be alive and Ashley would not have committed the crime. Thanks to Ashley's confession, investigators were able to reconstruct the timeline of the last hours of Sandy Razzo's life. On the day of the murder, July 5th, Sandy started work at the Green Iguana at 2:30 p.m. While she worked at the bar, Ashley waited in the parking lot with a .22 caliber handgun borrowed from her stepfather. All the while, Tracy was in constant communication with Ashley, coordinating her actions. Ashley waited patiently for Sandy to finish her shift. Sandy pulled out of the parking lot at 10:45 p.m., and Ashley followed her. Sandy arrived home at 11:10 p.m. and parked her car in the garage. Ashley entered right behind her. She started shooting. She continued firing until she ran out of ammunition. She fired a total of 8 shots. After that, the first thing Ashley did was to call Tracy and tell him that Sandy was dead. Tracy ordered a pizza and gave the delivery guy a good tip so he would remember him. That gave Tracy an alibi. In exchange for her cooperation, Ashley took a plea bargain, 25 years in prison in exchange for testifying against Tracy Humphrey. Many questioned the fairness of Ashley's sentence, suggesting that a life sentence would have been more appropriate. On March 10, 2006, Ashley Humphrey was sentenced to 25 years in prison. 14 years later, she made a sensational confession. Ashley Humphrey admitted to Piers Morgan on ITV's Killer Women that she came up with the plan to kill Sandy Razzo, and it wasn't her husband Timothy Tracy Humphrey's idea, as she had testified in court. "I suggested what if she were not to show up in court," Ashley said. "That is where it started and it snowballed. I was the first to say it. I don't know why I let him into my head the way I did." Had Ashley confessed initially to the plan and not taken a plea bargain to convict her husband, she could have been given a far worse sentence. She is currently incarcerated at Gadsden Correctional Institution in Quincy, Florida. Her release from prison is scheduled for December 13, 2028, when she will be 46 years old. In February 2006, a jury found Timothy Humphrey guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. He received an additional sentence of 15 years for attempted escape. Humphrey's overbearing and violent nature led him to believe that he could escape justice. However, he would spend the rest of his days behind bars, eventually meeting his end there. This was the outcome that everyone in Sandy Razzo's family wanted. Today, we will look at the events that took place in 2017 in the American state of Pennsylvania. 20-year-old Alina Shakit was a student at the University of Pittsburgh. On October 8, 2017, she stopped answering calls and texts. She was scheduled to meet her parents that morning, but neither her father nor her mother could reach her. They went to her home, and what they found there changed the lives of the Shakit family forever. Alina was born in Ivanovo, Russia, and her family moved to the United States when she was 3 years old. Alina was brilliantly talented. She loved singing, dancing, and acting. She touched the hearts of many with her passion and beauty on stage. Alina developed her passion for performing arts at a very early age. Her journey started at the European School of Rhythmic Gymnastics when she was 4 years old. At the age of 5, she was performing solo numbers in out-of-state competitions. In elementary school, she was a student of Tammy Lee's School of Dance, where she obtained starring roles performing her acrobatic dance numbers. In a short period of time, Alina learned dance styles and skills that would take years for most children to master. Because of her exceptional talent, she was privileged to perform in a group of much older, more experienced dancers. In 5th grade, Alina joined Karen Prunzik Broadway Dance Studio. She became adept at multiple styles of dance, including hip-hop, tap, and ballet. True to her Russian heritage, she even served as prima ballerina for the studio. She competed at Onstage New York and Access Broadway, and won multiple awards for her outstanding performances. Throughout the years, Alina also performed at several local Pittsburgh events, including Light Up Night, Macy's Christmas parades, and various events in Robinson Township, Kennywood, and Idlewild Park. Additionally, the confidence that she developed through dance allowed Alina to discover her talent as a singer. She brought audiences to tears with her beautiful renditions of many well-known songs, both on stage in front of an audience and at home with her family. When Alina was 14 years old, she suffered a severe knee injury during a ballet class and underwent a major surgery. After months of physical therapy, Alina received the heartbreaking news that she would not be able to dance competitively or recreationally again. Despite this major setback, she was committed to returning to the stage and was determined to find a way. While at Montour High School, Alina was a member of musical theater, through which she was able to safely exhibit her passion for dance. Alina returned to the stage as a gifted actress, dancer, vocalist, and comedian, shining her light and love on the audience. She starred in several musicals and plays, bringing tears, smiles, and much applause while on stage. Alina also was part of the chorus at Montour, and she performed at many events across the city and continued to shine her light and bring joy to all in attendance. Although Alina's injury prevented her from pursuing her passion as a dancer and performer, her treatment experience inspired her to pursue a career in the medical field. She wanted to help others who had suffered injuries that prevented them from pursuing their dreams. Alina decided that she wanted to become a doctor of physical therapy. Alina had a very close relationship with her parents. In a 2015 Facebook post to her father, she wrote, "Happy Father's Day to the greatest dad out there. Thank you for always being there for me and having my back no matter what. I couldn't get through one day without you. I love you so much, Dad." In another post that same year to her mother, she wrote, "Happy birthday to my gorgeous mother. I can't wait for another year of countless laughs and more memories. You are my best friend, and I love you with all my heart." Alina graduated from Montour High School in 2015 and spent the first 2 years of her college career at University of Pittsburgh, Greensburg. She lived in the Outdoor Adventure and Community Service Living Community during her time at Pitt Greensburg. In fact, she was the vice president of OACS during the spring 2017 semester. She loved participating in an organization that benefited animals and children. Again, Alina continued to shine her light, touching the lives of people and animals with her love and attention. Alina then transferred to the University of Pittsburgh's Oakland campus. She lived with her friends in an apartment and was prepared to dedicate herself to becoming a doctor of physical therapy. However, on October 8, 2017, Alina was senselessly and tragically killed at the young age of 20. Alina lived in this house with other students at the University of Pittsburgh. Her roommate, Zach Brandner, always remembered the night he last saw Alina alive. Returning home from a late shift at work, Zach and Alina took a Snapchat together at around midnight to poke fun at other students posting night-out selfies on Saturday night. Here's what Zach told reporters when they interviewed him. "We all said goodnight and said I love you like we did every night, and she went up to bed," Zach said. "A couple minutes later, Alina texted me the picture we had just taken. That was the last I heard from her. The next morning she was gone." Just over 8 hours later, Alina's mom, Ellie, and dad, Jan, came to pick up their daughter. They were due for a walk in the park for a breast cancer charity. In the interview, Zach talked about what exactly happened that morning. He said, "Her mom came to pick us up at 8:45 a.m. Her mom rings the doorbell and says, 'Is Alina not awake? She isn't answering my calls. Let's go wake her up.' I thought she slept through her alarm. Her dad was still in the car with their dog at this point. We went up and her mom started knocking on the door with no answer. This went on for 5 minutes and it started getting really loud. She started shaking the door. You could tell she was starting to get a bit scared, like this wasn't normal. The dog was barking uncontrollably. That's when Ellie called for her husband Jan, who came inside and broke down the door, and then they saw what was inside. At this point, I was halfway up the stairs and all I heard was screaming. Her parents were screaming at the top of their lungs saying, 'Alina's dead, Alina's dead.' It got hard to understand. They started speaking in Russian. It was horrible. They said it looked like her face had been cut off. Zach ran up and looked inside. He couldn't bear to look for more than a few seconds. I went into the room and it was horrifying. There are no words to describe what I saw. She was just laying there with her arms spread out. The whole side of her face was unrecognizable. You could barely recognize it was a face, it was so bashed in. She was laying in a pool of her own blood.
20-year-old female he believes to be unconscious, not breathing. Calls us, he is just extremely upset and repeating he can't look at her.
A siren pierced the morning silence, as if reminding us that somewhere nearby, someone's life hung in the balance. When the ambulance pulled up to the house, the doctors rushed inside. Alina's frightened mother met them at the door. With trembling hands and tears in her eyes, she showed the way to the room where her daughter was lying on the floor. Unfortunately, the doctors had no choice but to state Alina's death. The house was cordoned off by the police. Police Chief Scott Schubert said in a statement, "We do not believe at this time that this was a random act of violence. There is no continued threat to Oakland residents and the university communities. However, releasing additional details at this time could be detrimental to the investigation. As with each homicide investigation, our primary interest is collecting sufficient evidence that can be successfully used in a court of law. The investigation is ongoing. I encourage anyone with information that could be helpful to call police headquarters and speak to a violent crime unit detective," Schubert said. The medical examiner ruled Shaket's cause of death a homicide and said the manner of death was sharp, blunt trauma of the head. In fact, police already had a suspect. Investigators believed that Alina's ex-boyfriend, 21-year-old Matthew Darby, had committed the crime. Alina Shaket met Matthew Darby while she was studying at the University of Pittsburgh-Greensburg. Darby played basketball while he was a sophomore at the University of Pittsburgh at Greensburg in 2015-16. Alina, who had broken up with Darby after she transferred campuses, reported him for breaking into her home on September 20th. She filed a police report to say, "Defendant climbed up the gutter on the side of the house and broke through the second-floor window of my home. He did this because I left him and stopped answering his phone calls." Describing prior incidents of abuse, she wrote, "Grabbing, pushing, emotional abuse, jealousy, controlling." Jan Shaket said he and his wife, Ellie, accompanied their daughter to court last week to obtain the PFA. "For the last couple of weeks she had told me she tried to stop talking to him," he said of Darby. "She disconnected his phone number, Facebook, and all that stuff. I heard his name, but I never met him personally." In that criminal case, Darby was released on $10,000 bail September 26th, the same day he was arrested on the trespassing charges. In an interview, Alina's roommate Zach recalled repeatedly worrying about Alina and Darby's relationship. "Halfway through sophomore year was when I started finding out that he was abusive," he said. "In the time I knew them, around 3 years, there was a lot of fighting. I'm not just saying this because she was my best friend, but Alina was extremely loyal to him. She never cheated on him, unlike him." Zach described a moment last month when Darby stood outside their room, shouting at Alina. "It went on for over 20 minutes, and he kept accusing her of cheating on him with this boy. Outside my window on the first floor, we heard Matthew screaming at Alina. She never did anything. This boy lives in North Carolina, but he was screaming at her. All she was saying was, 'Matthew, please stop, stop.' He was uncontrollable." Zach explains this is one of the many occasions when Darby would flip out for no reason. "We would go out for pizza and everything would be fine, and then he would just turn on her. He would just go crazy for the littlest thing." Darby's demanding behavior, according to Zach, extended to her social media. If she liked a picture of a guy on Instagram, he would go and unlike it because he had her social media passwords, he said. This was before they broke up. She changed them when she broke up with him. He would never let her wear clothes that could be considered too sexy looking. He was extremely, extremely controlling. He was notorious for texting and calling, he added. Matthew would call her upwards of 20 times. If she didn't answer, he just kept on calling and it just wouldn't stop. She blocked his number after they broke up. It was after the breakup that Darby broke into their home on September 20th, according to the police report. Zach remembers that it was around 12:30 that night when he heard glass breaking outside. Thinking it was a bottle breaking at a party nearby, he texted his house group chat and put it out of his mind. Then he heard the sound of someone falling and then a shriek from upstairs. It was Alina screaming for help because Matthew Darby was in her room. At that point, we weren't sure what his intentions were, but now we think it was a failed attempt at murder. We caught him and got him out of her room. Then the police came and he was arrested. She was scared, you could tell, Zach said. She didn't feel safe at all. Call records from Alina's cell phone, which could not be located at the apartment when she was found, showed that she received 5 calls that went unanswered from a phone number later found to be Darby's between 4:15 a.m. and 4:55 a.m. Sunday, police said. Alina's cell phone was last located near Irwin, where I-76 intersects Route 30. According to the criminal complaint, he was picked up by a vehicle belonging to a commercial car service at 4:21 a.m. The driver told police he drove Darby to Simple Street and Ward Street in Oakland, near Cable Place. He said Darby got out of the car and asked him to wait 10 minutes. 10 minutes later, the driver said Darby asked him to wait 10 additional minutes. Approximately 5 minutes after that, the driver received a call on his phone asking to wait another 10 minutes, but told police said he could not wait longer and left the area. Investigators collected surveillance footage they said shows Darby tossing items into a sewer near Semple Street near Alina's place. Pittsburgh Police Homicide Detective Edward Fallert said he and other officers found 2 knives and a hammer in the same sewer grate, the latter of which appeared to have hair and skin stuck to the claw portion. Based on the above, police requested a warrant for Darby's arrest. He is charged with criminal homicide, burglary, flight to avoid apprehension, theft by unlawful taking and possessing instruments of crime. A few days after Alina's death, Matthew Darby was arrested in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. According to Myrtle Beach police, a concerned citizen reported seeing a male tampering with a window at a residence. When officers arrived, they found a man matching the description. Through the course of their investigation, it was determined that the male suspect was Darby. Now, he has been charged with providing false information to police and loitering for the incident in South Carolina. Each of the 2 new charges carry a monetary penalty and up to 30 days in jail. A South Carolina judge denied bond during the hearing. The judge declared Darby a potential flight risk due to the outstanding warrant in Pennsylvania. The judge explained Darby's right to an extradition hearing, or that he could waive that right. Darby then said he wanted his lawyer. He also said he wanted his lawyer when asked to give a plea on the charges in South Carolina. Alina's friends, many of them Pitt students, packed the courtroom along with her family. Many brought signs promoting domestic violence awareness and Alina's Law, a bill working its way through the state legislature that would allow judges to require electronic tracking of domestic abusers deemed to pose a high risk. Friends wore purple shirts with Alina's photo on them with the words "Our Russian Princess" written in Russian. The back said, "Love shouldn't hurt." The judge held all charges against Darby for trial, including charges of homicide, flight, burglary, theft, trespassing, and possessing an instrument of crime. Prosecutors introduced evidence that Darby had spent time on the Duquesne University campus the night of October 7th and into the morning hours of October 8th, where he had an interaction with University police officer Raymond Marr. Darby asked directions to Broadier Hall, Marr said. Security cameras captured Darby at various points across campus, including in the student union, which Marr allowed Darby to enter in order to charge his cell phone. He said Darby acted nervous and smelled vaguely of alcohol. One photo introduced by prosecutors shows a man they say is Darby wearing a striped shirt with an embroidered Miller Beer logo on it standing in an elevator on campus that night. That shirt was among Darby's possessions when he was arrested days later, police said. Prosecutors say evidence they introduced Friday, Jan 19, 2018, shows Matthew Darby on an elevator at Duquesne University in the hours before police say he killed his ex-girlfriend, Alina Shayket, in her Oakland home. Darby's attorney, David Schrager, disputes that the footage shows Darby. Hours later, shortly after 4 a.m., Darby called for an Uber, which took him from Broadier Hall to a street adjacent to Alina's home, the driver testified. Schrager said anyone using Darby's Uber account could have been the passenger. Darby later fled the Pittsburgh area, but police arrested him in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, 3 days after Alina's death. A photo taken by Pittsburgh homicide detectives shows 2 knives in a sewer grate in Oakland. The knives were collected as evidence, and suspect Matthew Darby is accused of tossing the knives as he left the home of his ex-girlfriend, where police say he stabbed and beat her to death. Darby's attorney, David Schrager, said that with a low threshold for evidence in preliminary hearings, He was not surprised by the outcome. "We have a lot of discovery we have to do, a lot of evidence gathering we have to do," he said. "We're going to get to tell our side of the story at a later time." He maintained Darby's innocence. "There is no forensic evidence, there is no testimonial evidence," he said. "All we have is a lot of circumstantial evidence, and that provides a maybe." Prosecutors said they would seek the death penalty against Darby, asserting 4 necessary aggravating factors, including that he was the subject of a PFA brought by the victim, that she was a prosecution witness against him, and that he had a history of felony convictions using violence or the threat of violence. Darby agreed to plead guilty to first-degree murder, which carries a mandatory life sentence in exchange for removing the possibility of a death penalty. Alina Shaykhit, a bright, vivacious college student, aspired to be a physical therapist and work with young children. "It was her dream," her father Jan Shaykhit said, "and she worked so hard. She was the best person in the world. I lost my beautiful princess," he said, crying. "I don't know what else to say." He described his daughter as well-liked and personable with a love of dancing and singing. "She made everyone happy," he said. "She had such a bright future." "He has taken Alina from us in an unimaginable way," Jan Shaykhit said of Darby. "He has stolen so much from us, including a future with our daughter." With her daughter gone, there would be no graduation, no wedding dress, no children, and no family holidays, Ellie Shaykhit said. "My daughter died," she said. "It's a very short phrase, but it's strong enough to shock and paralyze every single cell of my body when I have to pronounce that phrase." She said her mouth was not made for those words because her brain was not made to comprehend them. She described how she sat with her daughter in the courthouse after Darby was charged with breaking into her home. She requested and received a protection from abuse order. She said her daughter still cared for the man she also feared. She wanted to help him. Ellie Shaykhit said her daughter told her she didn't want that PFA and she didn't want him to go to jail. She wanted to help him and protect him. She told her mother she wanted him to leave her alone. She asked Darby if destroying her daughter brought him happiness. She told him that he failed. Clad in a red Allegheny County jail jumpsuit with a white long-sleeved shirt underneath, Darby spoke only to answer questions from Judge Manning. Asked why he was pleading guilty, he answered, "Because I am guilty." Darby was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, the mandatory sentence for first-degree murder. Darby also pleaded guilty to burglary, theft, trespassing, and possessing an instrument of crime in connection with Alina Shaykhit's killing. In a separate case in which he broke into Alina's apartment 2 weeks before the killing, Darby pleaded guilty to trespassing. However, a year later and with new counsel, Joseph Hudak, Darby filed a post-conviction petition arguing ineffective assistance of counsel. In his filings, Darby said his attorney at the time, Thomas Farrell, failed to explain or do a proper analysis of risk on the case. In its response, the Allegheny County District Attorney's Office said Darby's claims would not succeed, but conceded a hearing on the matter might be necessary. The decision is not based on any potential merit for Darby's claim, but instead on precedent known as the Coordinate Jurisdiction Rule, which provides that judges in the same jurisdiction should not overrule each other. Darby's new attorney, Joseph Hudak, stated, "This is the first step in taking back Darby's life sentence," he said. "I think Darby has been totally mischaracterized, and I believe Darby is guilty at the most of third-degree murder, and a jury might find him guilty of voluntary manslaughter." Hudak said Darby's lawyer should not have led him to a first-degree murder plea. "I don't believe the evidence ever supported a death penalty verdict," Hudak said. "And there was so much mitigation, I don't think he would have received the death penalty anyway." Darby has not given up trying to get out of prison, but so far all his attempts have failed to bring him the desired result. He is currently serving his life sentence. Alina was an exceptional young woman. She radiated love, life, and energy. She had a compassionate spirit that made everyone around her feel special. She had a remarkable smile that brightened every room she entered. She had a contagious laugh that made everyone feel like they were in on the joke. She was not just alive, she was living. Although her family misses her desperately, the Shaykits are proud of the legacy that Alina has left and the light she has brought into this world. Today, we take a look at events that happened in 2019 in the UK. Emma Faulds, a 39-year-old care worker, went missing under strange circumstances on April 28, 2019. 2 days after that, her family contacted the police, and the authorities launched a massive search. To find out the truth about what happened to Emma, police had to search an area of 700 square miles. Emma lived in Kilmarnock in 2019. Kilmarnock is a town and former burgh in East Ayrshire situated in southwest Scotland. Her home was filled with silence and comfort, and her faithful companion, a dog named Maverick, always followed her faithfully. Emma's life was measured and quiet. Emma was known among her neighbors not only for her kind heart, but also for her ability to find a common language with everyone around her. Her dog Maverick, an adorable West Highland Terrier, was not just a pet, but a true friend, and was like a son to Emma. Together, they would take long walks in the woods and parks, enjoying the fresh air and the beauty of nature. On April 25, 2019, Emma paid a visit to her parents. Her mother, 70-year-old Margaret Faulds, and her father, 70-year-old Ian, were delighted to see their daughter. When visiting her parents, Emma always brought with her an atmosphere of warmth and homeliness. Throughout dinner, Emma's parents shared their memories and plans. They were stories she had heard many times, but each time she found a new inspiring detail in them. The conversation at the table was easy and relaxed, and every now and then her parents reminisced about the past, when Emma was a little girl and how they used to go on picnics to the lake as a family. And Emma herself laughed with them, immersed in the memories of the carefree days of her childhood. But the conversation did not stop there. The parents made plans for the future. They told her that they were going on a trip to Brighton to visit relatives who lived there. Emma noted to herself how easily and cheerfully, despite their age, her parents made their plans, retaining their enthusiasm for life and new experiences. After dinner, they moved to the living room, where they continued their conversation over a cup of coffee. This evening became for Emma not only a meeting with her loved ones, but also another reminder of the importance of family, of that invisible thread that binds generation after generation, of what is truly valuable in life. No one guessed that in just a few days there would be no trace of the family peace. Emma told her parents that she was going to meet her friend Ross Willocks on Sunday, April 28th. Emma and Ross had known each other for 18 years. They met when they both worked as wardens at Kilmarnock Prison. Emma told her parents that Ross had adopted a dog from a shelter and she wanted to visit him. In a text message, Emma admitted to her sister that she was going to have a bit of a mad one. Ross lived in Fairfield Park, Moncton. At about 8 p.m., Emma texted a friend to tell her that she was at Ross's house and that she planned to have a glass of wine and stay the night. Emma was usually in frequent contact with her loved ones, and her phone was described as an extension of her arm. But the next day, Emma didn't call or text any of her friends or family. Her mother, Margaret, said this was totally out of character. On April 30th, Emma's parents were visiting relatives in Brighton. Her mother, Margaret, received a call from Emma's employers and learned that her daughter had not turned up for work. Emma communicated with a family member or friend every day, so her parents knew right away that something was wrong. "We were on edge and decided to report her missing because it was so unlike her," her father said. At about 4:30 p.m. that day, police officers broke into Emma's flat in Fullerton Street, Kilmarnock, and discovered that her pet dog Maverick, who had been heard crying by a neighbor, was home alone. Everyone who knew Emma well was sure she would never leave her dog unattended. Maverick had had an operation on his cruciate ligament, and Emma kept him in a cage while he was recuperating to stop him running about and jumping. As the last person to see her alive, Ross Willix became the immediate focus of the investigation, codenamed Operation Solzen. He told officers that Emma had decided to drive back to her flat, which was less than 9 miles away, at about 11 p.m. He said they were at his house in Moncton, and she got worried about her dog, which had undergone an operation, and wanted to take it home. They decided to go to her flat. He said he joined her for the journey and later took about a dozen lines of cocaine. Willix said Emma was positive and upbeat and enjoying herself. She was talking about her forthcoming 40th and talking about a cruise. He claimed to have gone home in a taxi at about 7 a.m. on April 29th. Emma's sister, Miriam Faulds, who works in Abu Dhabi, returned to Scotland to join the search for Emma after she was reported missing. She flew back to Scotland on the 1st of May 2019 and began helping in the search for her sister the next day. Emma disappeared suddenly, leaving behind a feeling of deep anxiety and uncertainty. From the moment her family were unable to reach her, a complex and intense operation to find her began. The police, joining forces with Emma's friends and family, quickly sprang into action. The streets of the city were soon filled with information leaflets with Emma's image on them. They included information about her last known whereabouts and a request to report to the police any information about where Emma might be. Information about Emma's disappearance spread on social media, with each post on Emma's family page attracting more and more comments of support and hope for her safe return home. Emma's family filled with despair, pleading with the public every day for help. "Any detail could be crucial," they wrote. "Please help us find Emma." The police, sensing the importance of solving the case as quickly as possible, also appealed to the townspeople for help. Detectives have asked owners of private CCTV cameras to check their footage. Perhaps Emma's figure will be glimpsed among the usual street scenes, or maybe something suspicious will be recorded. Hope and fear mixed into a solid sense of unease, yet all who knew Emma and loved her did not lose faith. Hundreds of complete strangers did not remain indifferent, turning the town into a single organism, living a common idea: to find Emma and bring her home. The importance of obtaining evidence in Emma's disappearance became a top priority for the police. Every find could be a clue to the mysterious disappearance of a woman, and every piece of evidence, every word from a witness, became a piece of the puzzle that the investigators were trying to piece together. In the intense work, it was necessary to take into account every detail. Every conversation with neighbors and relatives became for detectives a source of new ideas and versions that could shed light on what happened to Emma. The investigative team's ability to thoroughly analyze the evidence was a critical success factor. Their attention to detail and persistence in the search for the truth allowed them to build a fragile but decisive chain of events leading to the unraveling of Emma's fate. In addition, it was important for the investigators to consider not only the physical evidence, but also the psychological evidence. They tried to understand Emma's character, her relationship with others, to see if she had any enemies. What could have driven her to take steps that most people would consider unlikely? Emma's car was critical to the timeline. Footage from a dashcam revealed the blue BMW 1 Series was parked outside Ross Willix's house at 5:39 p.m. on April 28th. The next morning, Emma's car was parked outside her house, but the odd thing was that the car was parked on the opposite side of the road. Emma had obsessive-compulsive disorder and always parked her car right outside her flat. It was a great stroke of luck for the police when they obtained footage from a private CCTV camera which captured that the car was not actually being driven by Emma, but by someone else. It was a man. Let's take a look at the footage that the police released. If you look closely, you can see the driver wiping down the interior of the car, including the steering wheel and the dashboard. Investigators believe that Emma's car was driven by Ross Willix and that he knew what happened to Emma. Willix did not join Emma's family and friends when they put up posters and distributed leaflets around Ayrshire after she was reported missing. Emma's sister Sarah Faulds told investigators that after Emma disappeared, she contacted Willix and he gave her two different versions of what happened. On April 30th, 2019, she texted Willix, "Hi Ross, I'm just wondering if she's still with you. No one's seen her." Willix said she was not with him, and when Sarah asked when she left, in a text he told her, "Sunday. Maverick was getting rowdy with my dog Patty, and Emma was getting stressed." In a later message, Willix informed Sarah that he had driven Emma home himself. As the search for Emma intensified, experts began to plot Willix's movements using CCTV and analysis of his cell phone. CCTV footage was discovered showing Willix going into various shops in Ayr and buying bleach, rubber gloves, and tins of outdoor disinfectant. Detective Crombie said, "When we put all those pieces of evidence together, it painted a suspicious picture of Ross Willix's movements." They also examined his background and discovered he used to build wind farms near the Galloway Forest, in Dumfries and Galloway. This became critical when cameras picked up two journeys to the area in the days following Emma's disappearance. The first, on April 29th, was made in his Mercedes SUV. The following day, he made the trip in a Jaguar he bought for his wife, who was working abroad when Emma vanished. A police dog trained in the scent of dead bodies later gave a positive indication during the search of the Jaguar car by repeatedly barking at the boot area. Police drafted in search experts from the UK National Crime Agency, as well as an officer who had worked as a wind farm liaison and had intimate knowledge of the area. The Galloway Forest Park covers around 700 square miles, and Detective Crombie said some parts look like the surface of the moon. Digital forensics experts analyzed Willix's cell phone and overlaid it with the CCTV, which had been recovered from the routes he took in the 48 hours after Emma vanished. As I mentioned earlier, the police dog signaled during the search of the Jaguar used by Willix. So the investigators realized that Emma was dead, but they needed more convincing evidence to convict Willix. They needed to find Emma's body. Police once again appealed to the public for help. The vehicles are known to have been on the A714 Girvan to Newton Stewart Road, the Mercedes on Monday, April 29th, and the Jaguar on Tuesday, April 30th. Detective Martin Fergus, who is leading the inquiry, said, "What Emma's family is going through is unimaginable, and our priority is to find her. I am thankful to members of the public who have been in touch and have provided us with valuable information which has led us to explore this area. I believe the A714 route is key to helping us find Emma, and I am appealing again to those who use this route regularly. Please take time to think back and consider if you saw a Mercedes or Jaguar car on this road, or parked up somewhere, or even off-road. If you have dash cam footage, please take the time to go through and check it." He added, "You may not realize it, but you could have captured footage of the vehicles in these locations, which could provide us with vital information and assist us in finding Emma." Willix was under constant police surveillance as he was the primary and only suspect in the Emma Faulds disappearance case. Another important lead was provided to the police by Ross Willix's best friend, Neil Moore. Moore said he spotted the searches on his device after Willix had asked to use it. Moore told prosecutor Paul Kearney that when he looked at his iPad on May 8, 2019, he found searches he had not made. These included, can cars be traced by GPS, as well as do police put tracking devices on cars, and can UK police trace your car without a warrant? Willix was under surveillance when he was arrested at his mother's house on May 8 on suspicion of Emma's murder. He pleaded not guilty and stated that he did not know where Emma might be. The Galloway Forest covers an area of about 700 square miles. However, by using specialist techniques, police were able to focus on a search area. Police called in the help of Professor Lorna Dawson during Operation Solzen and the search of the 700 square miles of Galloway Forest area, where Emma's body was suspected to be. The soil expert was asked to examine a number of items, including Timberland boots worn by Willix. Professor Dawson made her findings on June 11th. 24 hours later, Emma's naked remains were found hidden in an area of Glentrool Forest, someone would not normally walk through. There was a 92% soil match from the boots compared to the earth which covered Emma's body. A further possible match from the forest site was found under the wheel arch of a Jaguar car. Willix knew the area through his work as a wind farm project manager, but he told police any other sighting of him in the area would have been to walk his dogs. Mobile phone analysis also put him in and around the location. Detective Pakalek said his dog Bear, who was specially trained to find dead bodies, began barking, which indicated he had found something. The officer returned to the spot to investigate further after donning sterile gloves. Pakalek said, "I lifted the vegetation to see if it was a body part or torso. I could see the lower portion of a naked body." Hundreds of mourners gathered at the New Lay Kirk in Kilmarnock to pay their respects before a service at Holmesford Bridge Crematorium. Emma's West Highland Terrier Maverick, wearing a blue bow tie, was at the front of the procession out of the church. On the social media page of the family's butcher's business, Emma's relatives said they only now felt able to make a public statement. They said they had received a multitude of cards, hundreds of messages, and fields of flowers during this desperately sad and painful time. This proves that there is a great caring community spirit in Kilmarnock and further afield, indeed worldwide, they added. Thank you all so much for your support and kindness you have shown us during the past few weeks. We're not there yet, and it will be a long time until we get answers to all the questions that have been haunting us, but knowing that everyone is with us makes it easier to bear. They signed off the message from the Faulds family and, of course, Emma's dog Maverick. Ross Willix has been charged with the murder of Emma Faulds. Willix is also charged with attempting to defeat the ends of justice by hiding Emma's body for days before dumping it in a forest and attempting a cover-up of his alleged involvement in her death between April 28 and May 8, 2019. Prosecutors allege he disposed of Emma's mobile phone, clothing, and belongings, and carried out an online search about blood and how to remove vehicle tracking. Prosecutors also allege Willix repeatedly left voicemails on Emma's phone, pretending that he believed she was alive, and he quizzed officers about her whereabouts, claiming he was worried. Jurors were told Emma's body was so badly decomposed, a pathologist could not state what caused her death, although she had an apparent injury on her neck. Pathologist Dr. John Williams told the High Court in Glasgow he carried out a post-mortem examination of Emma Faulds, but Dr. Williams said he was limited in what he could establish from her remains due to the state of decomposition. Under questioning from prosecutor Paul Kearney, he also said he could not be definite as to when Emma died. Dr. Williams's report did confirm she had no fractures to the arms, legs, or ribs, and no significant natural disease was detected. Prosecutor Paul Kearney asked the witness, "So nothing to point to a natural cause, but with the great caveat, your examination was affected by the state of decomposition?" Dr. Williams replied, "That is right." During the trial, it was learned that toxicology samples taken from Emma Faulds contained traces of cocaine and alcohol. Reading from his report, Dr. Williams said, "In summary, the medical cause of death has not been established. The degree of decomposition has limited many aspects of the post-mortem. As a result, the jury was told the cause of death must be ruled as unascertained." Forensic scientist Joanne Cochran told the court how she took a taping from a seat lever of the BMW during an examination of the vehicle in September 2019. The expert said it matched Ross Willix's DNA profile. The trial also heard how the accused's home was examined for blood. Forensic scientist Joanne Cochran said 2 small droplets were found, which matched the DNA profile of Ross Willix's father. There was also small contact blood staining elsewhere, which was said to match the accused, but no other blood was found. Willix had denied murder during the trial. Willix's version of events was that he had been partying with Ms. Faulds before they then went in her car to her flat in Kilmarnock, Ayrshire, around 9 miles away, where he claimed he left her fit and well. Donald Findlay, who was acting for Willix, said it would not be appropriate to express any contrition on behalf of his client, who denies he was responsible. Findlay added, He is not the kind of person I would have expected to have found himself guilty of a crime of murder. Murder of somebody that he knew and cared for. They cared for each other, not in any romantic sense, but as friends. Something catastrophic went wrong in the early hours of the morning, and one life was lost. On the first day of the trial, Emma's mom, Margaret Faulds, said of where her daughter was found, "No one would walk there or drive there. You would have to see it to believe how remote it was." One person did venture there, however, determined to make sure no one could find out what he had done to his friend of almost 2 decades. On June 11th, soil expert Professor Lorna Dawson produced her findings after examining a pair of Timberland boots owned by Willix and Mercedes and Jaguar cars for the presence of soil. Professor Dawson's analysis led to search teams refocusing on wet, boggy areas and, ultimately, finding Emma. She told the trial that there was no natural path to the deposition site, and it was not an area you would normally walk through, you would avoid it. The soil recovered from the boots, Professor Dawson said, came from the deposition site rather than a similar common bog habitat. After a 6-week trial, a jury found Willix guilty of murder and attempted obstruction of justice. Emma's emotional parents and sisters Miriam and Sarah were present to hear the verdict. Judge Mulholland told Willix, "You know what the sentence for murder will is. It will be life imprisonment. Be under no misapprehension. This was a foul crime on a young woman loved by her family. You would have visited upon them a lifetime of wondering if she was still alive had her body not been recovered as a result of the sterling work by the police and experts. It was in such a remote place, and you had intended her body would never be recovered." Willix showed no emotion during the announcement of the verdict. The callous killer admitted he did not take part in any search for Emma. He insisted the bottles of bleach were used to clean his decking and not wipe away any evidence of a crime. What happened between him and Emma at his home that night remains unclear, and only he truly knows what led to her death. In June 2021, Ross Willix was sentenced to life in prison. He will have to spend 20 years in prison before he can apply for parole. Only you will know what happened in your house that night that led to you killing your friend. You were not as clever as you thought you were, Judge Mulholland told Willix. In a statement released after the guilty verdict, Emma's family said, "We are absolutely devastated by Emma's death, and her not being with us has left a tremendous void in all our lives. We cannot believe she was taken from us in such a violent way, and what makes it even worse is that Ross Willix was supposed to be her friend. The last 2 years have been the worst our family has ever experienced, culminating in a 6-week murder trial in the High Court in Glasgow, which ended earlier today. The conclusion, as you are probably aware, is the man who murdered our beloved Emma has been found guilty. I feel on behalf of my family that I should use this message to thank everyone, friends, customers, and the wider community for their fantastic support, kindness, and help when needed. We know we will never get Emma back, but we feel with all the professionals involved in the case, we've got justice for her." In this video, we take a look at the events that took place in the American state of Illinois. On the evening of January 23, 2022, 20-year-old Charisma Arisman left her home in Forest View, Illinois, driving a red 2014 Ford Fiesta, not knowing she would not return home. When she did not return home and calls went unanswered, a police report was filed and a search for Charisma began. Charisma Marie Arisman was born September 17, 2001, to Christina and Jeffrey Arisman. She was an outgoing person from the moment she learned to talk. Her father, Jeffrey, remembers taking her to the park as a child, where she would boldly approach other children and ask if they wanted to be friends with her or play with her. She was never shy, Jeffrey Arisman said. She was the most open and outgoing girl you've ever met. Anyone who knew Charisma Arisman wouldn't be surprised by her career choice to become a nurse. It's all she ever wanted to do was help people. Charisma was fiercely independent and worked 2 jobs to make her goal of becoming a nurse a reality. She recently enrolled herself into Triton College in River Grove, but she didn't tell anyone she was returning to school after taking a year off because of the pandemic until the first day of classes. The Arisman family reported their daughter missing Monday morning, January 24, 2022, after she left their Forest View home the night before and didn't return. After Charisma's parents anxiously and worriedly reported her mysterious disappearance, the police, driven by the desire to find the young woman, immediately launched an investigation with a range of decisive and carefully considered measures. From the very beginning, the officers conducted exhaustive and detailed interviews with her parents and next of kin in an effort to gather as much valuable information as possible about Charisma's last days with her family, her mood, possible worries, and main activities, as well as to find out in which companies and with which people she preferred to spend her time, which of her friends she was closest to. Each of Charisma's friends and acquaintances was questioned, but unfortunately, none of them could shed any light on her possible whereabouts. All of them, as one, claimed that she had not been in contact with them recently, as if she had vanished into thin air or hidden from view, leaving only the echoes of her smile in the memories of her loved ones. Particular attention was paid to investigating the possible existence of enemies in Charisma's entourage. It was necessary to thoroughly investigate whether there were conflicts or disagreements with anyone in her life, whether among her acquaintances there were those who could have benefited significantly from her disappearance. The analytical eye of the investigators was directed towards reconstructing the events, searching for motives and paths that could have led to such a sudden disappearance. At the same time, the investigators sought to understand whether Charisma had ulterior motives for leaving her parents' home. They tried to penetrate the secret nooks and crannies of her personal and family life to uncover the circumstances that might have prompted her to take such a drastic step. However, Charisma's parents, overwhelmed with anxiety and love for their daughter, immediately rejected such an assumption. They asserted with absolute certainty that their daughter had not had the slightest reason to run away from home. "We're all just in shock, in complete and utter shock," Jeffrey Arisman said. "We knew the second she went missing something was wrong because she doesn't go missing. This isn't the girl that runs away when she's upset or spends days at a guy's house and doesn't tell anybody. At 20 years old, she texts her mom, 'Mom, going to so-and-so's house, be back in a couple hours.'" It is important to note that the public has also joined the search. The police called on anyone with any information to come forward and help in the search. This comprehensive approach to the investigation allowed for maximum focus on finding Charisma and clarifying all the circumstances surrounding her disappearance in the hope of bringing her home as soon as possible. The leaflets distributed stated the following: "Charisma Arisman is missing under suspicious circumstances, and the police are asking for the public's help in locating her." At 10:17 p.m. January 23, 2022, Charisma Arisman left her residence in Forest View, Illinois. She was wearing a tan jacket and black pants and carrying a small pink backpack. Charisma has missed work and school and has had no contact with family. She has 4 tattoos, a Virgo symbol behind her left ear, half-moon sun tattoo on the back of her neck, large Medusa tattoo on her right thigh, in red ink, the number 777 on the inside of her right forearm. She also has a small diamond stud nose piercing. She is traveling in a red 2014 Ford Fiesta 4-door sedan with Illinois license plates. After police began investigating Charisma's disappearance, the key detail that investigators immediately noticed was her car, a red 2014 Ford Fiesta. This brightly colored vehicle was easy to identify, and police soon identified it as an important target of the search. Patrol cars drove tirelessly around the neighborhoods, making sure to leave no nooks and crannies unattended. Parking lots near shopping centers, as one of the most likely places to find the car, were the focus of attention. Police officers scrutinized every corner of these parking lots, breaking through the rows of cars in hopes of spotting a red Ford Fiesta. Not only parking lots at large shopping malls were checked, but also less obvious places, such as closed or underground parking lots, where cars left behind by still unreturned owners could be located. While the police tirelessly continued their search, the public followed the developments closely. Local television stations were increasingly reporting on the investigation, Charisma's disappearance, and how everyone could help by reporting any information about Charisma's car or herself. People on social media shared posts, wanting to contribute to the common cause of the search. All the measures taken by the police brought results, but unfortunately, this is a story without a happy ending. Charisma's parents reported her disappearance to police on Monday, January 24, 2022. On Friday, January 28, police found the Ford parked on a street. Charisma was found unresponsive in the backseat of her car around 5:30 p.m. Friday in the 5900 block of West Iowa Street on the city's west side, a Chicago police report shows. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The car had been parked there since Monday morning, according to the police report. The Cook County Medical Examiner's Office determined Sunday that Charisma Erisman died of strangulation and smothering and determined her death to be a homicide. If we look at Google Maps, we can see a panorama of where Charisma's car was found, amongst a lot of other cars. If Charisma's car had been parked on another street, more deserted and less busy, it would certainly have attracted more attention. It is possible that the perpetrator deliberately chose this location where the car would not arouse suspicion. According to the police report, Charisma's red Ford Fiesta had been parked here since Monday morning, which means it took police 5 days to find it. But now, the investigators' first priority was to identify the culprit. Police requested access to Charisma's cell phone geolocation data and reviewed surveillance footage of areas she frequented. Each piece of information was carefully analyzed to create a clear timeline of her movements. In today's world, online dating has become an integral part of everyday life for many people. They offer an opportunity to meet and communicate with people from different parts of the world, find like-minded people, and even potential partners. However, despite the numerous advantages, online dating carries certain risks and dangers that should be taken into account. One of the main risks is the issue of security. When registering on dating platforms, the user often provides personal information such as name, age, location, and photos. Unscrupulous people can use this data for personal gain, such as identity theft or other fraudulent activities. Another danger is related to possible false perceptions of the interlocutor's personality. Virtual communication allows people to hide their true motives by creating illusory images. This means that the person you are communicating with may not be who they say they are. This distortion of reality can lead to unpredictable consequences, especially if online communication is followed by real meetings. There is a risk of interacting with individuals who have malicious intent. Such people may use online platforms to find victims. It is important to be vigilant, closely monitor any suspicious behavioral signs, and avoid situations that could jeopardize your safety. While investigating Charisma Erisman, investigators discovered that she met 24-year-old Richard Chavez on the internet. Chavez had been in trouble with the law and had been on the police radar several times. Court records show Chavez pleaded guilty in 2016 to a misdemeanor count of resisting or obstructing police, and he was sentenced to a year of court supervision. Prosecutors dropped a count of contributing to the delinquency of a minor with his plea. At the time Charisma disappeared, Richard Chavez was on a police wanted list for driving under the influence of alcohol. Digging deeper into the investigation, investigators decided to examine Charisma's cell phone records, hoping they would provide long-awaited clues to solving the mystery. And what was their surprise when they discovered that the last call made by Charisma was to a number registered to Chavez. Quite remarkably, the last text message sent was also sent to Chavez. Investigators could not recognize all these facts as mere coincidence. All the evidence pointed inexorably to Chavez and his connection to the disappearance of Charisma Erisman, and it was no coincidence that he became the main and only suspect. The detectives scrutinized the data and determined the exact location of Chavez's residence. Deciding it was time for a visit, the two experienced investigators went to the address where he lived. As they approached his door, they knocked, and when the door opened, the detectives were confronted by a face covered with an expression of genuine amazement. Chavez, whose eyes were momentarily fixed in surprise, evidently did not expect to see policemen on his doorstep. The awkwardness of the moment quickly gave way to an inner struggle in his gaze as he seemed to gather his strength of character, turning excitement into restraint. Chavez seemed to gather his will in a fist and tried to look unfazed. The detectives, without giving him time for further thought, brought him up to speed, informing him that their visit was directly related to the disappearance of Charisma Erisman and that they wanted to ask him some questions. Chavez tried to give the appearance of complete control over the situation, but there was a subtle tinge of nervousness in the depths of his eyes. He did not deny that he knew Charisma Erisman, and even said that he had met her only a few days before. With a face devoid of emotion, he confirmed to detectives that Charisma had come to his home on John 23 and said their meeting ended in consensual intimacy. Chavez claimed he went to bed around 8 p.m. that night. When he woke up around 10 a.m., he discovered that Charisma was no longer in his house. It occurred to him that she had simply gone home because the last time he saw her, there was complete harmony. When he finished his story, Chavez fell silent, staring intently into the detectives' faces, as if waiting to see what they would do next. Perhaps he hoped they would just walk away, but the detectives realized there were some inconsistencies in Chavez's story. They couldn't help but notice a few scratches on Chavez's hands. Charisma may have fought back when he attacked her and scratched Chavez's hands in the ensuing struggle. This fact inevitably cast doubt on the veracity of Chavez's words. According to court records, officers arrested Chavez on an outstanding warrant for DUI, and he remained in jail on that case until police arrested him as a suspect in the Charisma Erisman case. Charisma's parents said they have been left in the dark for much of the investigation, often learning updates through news reports. Her father said there is evidence to dispute every claim Chavez has made, and that his daughter was not the type to go meet someone unknown to hook up. He knows better than that. This isn't Charisma, her father, Jeffrey Erisman, said. She would never have met up with someone on her own. Her parents believe someone their daughter knew must have told her this evil man was trustworthy. In order to convict Chavez of Charisma's death, the police needed to have conclusive evidence. Detectives began interviewing Chavez's neighbors, and they were able to find something far more valuable than witness testimony. They found several surveillance videos that gave a clearer picture of what happened to Charisma. Here's what the court record said. Charisma was last seen leaving her home on Forest View, Illinois, around 10:15 p.m. on Sunday night, January 23rd. Prosecutors said that night, she drove to Richard Chavez's Oak Park home. Around 10:40 p.m., a neighbor's surveillance camera recorded Chavez greet her and then go inside with Erisman. Prosecutors said she never left. Early the next morning, around 7:30 a.m. on Monday, January 24th, surveillance video captures Chavez getting into Erisman's car. Later that morning, separate surveillance video capture him exit the car after parking it on the 5900 block of West Iowa in the South Austin neighborhood on the city's west side. Then, Chavez allegedly walked around for about an hour in the neighborhood before he ultimately called his brother to come pick him up, less than a mile away from where he left Charisma's car. During the investigation, prosecutors said a phone number belonging to Chavez was the last number she called, and her device triangulation showed it was at his address on the night she was last seen. While he was in jail, authorities recorded a phone call between Chavez and his parents in which he told them to get his passport ready. Investigators who executed a search warrant at his home on January 31st found hair clippings in the garbage and a partially packed suitcase in his bedroom. 24-year-old Richard Chavez was charged with one count of first-degree murder. Judge Susana Ortiz ordered Chavez held without bail on a charge of first-degree murder. She also ordered him held without bail for violating the bond terms in his pending DUI case. The victim's family and friends were devastated by her death. Charisma's grandmother, Kathy Arisman, made a statement on behalf of her family. To Richard Chavez, "If you only knew what a loving soul Charisma Arisman is. She had dreams of being a nurse to care for others. She hugged everyone she met and said, 'I love you.' She helped others in so many ways. Her wake was the most supportive, loving group of souls that knew her. She doesn't get to finish or yet start her dream path. You took that away from her. She can't have her children she one day would have. Her 4-year-old niece that called her Titi still asks for her. My house has been a cry of wailing sounds of grief, pain, and loss. You took the most precious, loving soul you could have even known. I leave this in our Lord Jesus' hands. Who are you to take another one's life in your hands and murder them? What man takes a beautiful young woman's life? We can't have Charisma back in our lives." The Arisman family wanted to thank everyone for their support throughout this tragedy. A website created by Charisma's family states that on February 23, 2023, a court hearing was held where Richard Chavez was indicted on a new charge. Specifically, he was charged with attempting to conceal a felony. Since then, no information about further proceedings has appeared on this site or elsewhere. Presumably, Chavez has not yet been sentenced. Charisma Arisman loved hanging out with her friends and taking day trips to the city, where she would try new coffee shops or get fancy cupcakes, her father said. Jeffrey Arisman wants his daughter to be remembered for her tight bear hugs, which he described as her squeezing every drop of love out of her into you, and her caring heart. Because that's what she was. She was a beautiful soul. She's a pretty girl on the outside and inside. There's nobody that can match that. I've never met anyone in my life, he said. Charisma Arisman's best friend, without a doubt, was her mother. It's all she cared about, Jeffrey Arisman recalled. I don't know how my wife's going to survive without her. Her whole world was that girl. The work of investigators is not just the fulfillment of official duties, but a true art that requires deep knowledge, intuition, and often incredible perseverance. When we think of investigations, we immediately think of cinematic plots with quick solutions and vivid revelations, but the reality is far from this illusion. In everyday life, investigators face many challenges, each of which requires a special approach. They work to create a complete picture of the incident, collecting evidence and reconstructing events. And sometimes, despite the many hours spent researching case files, some crimes remain unsolved. This may be due to a lack of evidence, a lack of witnesses, or, conversely, the presence of confusing and contradictory evidence. The complexity of the work of the investigator is also in the fact that many incidents at first glance look unambiguous, but when analyzed in depth, they turn out to be much more confusing. There are situations when the initial versions turn out to be completely untenable. For example, what appeared to be a crime motivated by jealousy turns out to be the result of a confluence of circumstances. Such variability requires the investigator to be particularly flexible and adaptable. Particularly impressive are the moments when an unexpected twist creeps into the case. A little noticed evidence, which was previously written off as unimportant, becomes a clue. It happens that a thing thrown at the scene of a crime, a fingerprint, or even an accidentally dropped word, changed the course of the entire investigation, forcing a new look at seemingly familiar details. It is such surprises that require real skill from the investigator. To notice the invisible and unravel the most intricately woven tangle of lies and misconceptions. In today's video, we take a look at one of the cases that turned out to be not what it seemed at first glance. This story took place in Canada and immediately attracted public attention with its unusual course of events. Nicole Porciello, who also went by the last name Hasselman, was a 34-year-old woman with a kind heart and endless patience who worked in student support services at Templeton Secondary School. She was not just a helper, she was a true mentor to many kids who were sometimes lost in the complex maze of their adolescence. The work environment at this school was not just a place of duty for Nicole, but a second family, a place of companionship and genuine support. Nicole's colleagues saw her as an inspiration. Always responsive and helpful, she made friends among teachers, administrators, and other school staff. Her ability to connect with the most difficult teenagers was the visible embodiment of the miracle of pedagogy. Colleagues loved Nicole not only for her professionalism, but also for the simple human warmth she spread around. Outside of work, Nicole was a mother raising her son, who was 10 years old in 2018. Her son, just like herself, was a sensitive and kind boy. Nicole managed to combine her career and raising her child, investing in both with genuine passion and care. She strived to be an example to him of someone who always opens her heart to the world and makes it a little bit better. Unfortunately, January 16, 2018 was the day that changed the lives of Nicole's family and friends forever. Burnaby police said the crash, involving a 2017 charcoal gray Kia Sorento SUV in the 8000 block of Barnett Highway, happened on November 16 at approximately 10 p.m. The emergency services arrived at the scene, their sirens breaking the evening silence. In the glare of the warning lights, the car's mangled body looked even more ominous. After colliding with a lamppost, a man was trapped inside the car, his life now hanging in the balance. Rescuers quickly cordoned off the scene, coordinating with police and medical teams. They realized that time had become their invisible enemy. Every moment of delay could turn into tragedy. Their movements were quick and precise. It wasn't just a skill, it was a mastery honed by years of training and experience. Meanwhile, another group of rescuers brought special equipment into action. Hydraulic cutters gripped the metal furiously, tearing it apart with an ominous crack, but the operators remained focused and calm. It was amazing how much this process, which seemed frightening and loud, could inspire hope and confidence in the team's professionalism. The man inside the vehicle remained motionless. Medics fussed around him, ready to administer medical attention as soon as rescuers freed him from the steel embrace. Finally, after several minutes of hard work, the rescuers' commander signaled that the victim could be pulled out. The man was carefully extracted from the damaged car and placed in the caring hands of medics. Emergency services worked like a fine-tuned mechanism, each part of which performed its indispensable role. Medics immediately began to provide first aid, carefully checking the condition of the man. After making sure that the condition of the victim was stable, they carefully transferred him to a stretcher and took him to the ambulance. They have already started preparations for transportation to the nearest hospital, where the man will be able to receive more specialized care. The victim was John Pupel. When he was taken to the hospital, the doctors immediately conducted a full examination and diagnostics to rule out possible hidden injuries. They recorded a few bruises and a mild concussion, but fortunately, no serious injuries were found. The patient's condition was stable, and John's life was not threatened. After providing the necessary medical care, the man was left under observation for some time to ensure a full recovery. John was a real estate agent who was allegedly struggling with an addiction to illegal substances. John and Nicole's relationship began the way great love often begins, with romance, deep affection, and mutual understanding. They dreamed of the future together, made plans, and shared thoughts with each other. At first, it seemed that quarrels bypassed them, and each new day brought even more joy from spending time together. However, over time, John began to show character traits that Nicole could not ignore. At first, his desire to control was perceived as caring, but gradually turned into an obsessive mania. He claimed that he was thus protecting Nicole from negative outside influences, alienating her from friends and family. It went as far as checking her cell phones and social media. His jealousy knew no bounds, and now he had a hard time hiding his aggression. Each new conflict only increased his desire to dominate, and Nicole found herself in a psychological trap that was not easy to get out of. On one occasion, he pushed her chest hard enough to cause her physical discomfort for weeks. Their relationship had lasted 7 years. Despite the pain and fear that gradually filled their life together, Nicole still believed in John's sweet promises that everything would change. He vowed that he would find the strength to be better, to once again be the loving and trustworthy partner he had been in the beginning. Those vows kept Nicole from finally breaking up, even though somewhere in the back of her mind she knew that John's behavior would likely never change. They had broken up several times, but then John would ask for another chance, and Nicole would give it. Their next breakup, which Nicole thought was final, happened 9 days before the car accident. But John wasn't going to put up with the breakup. He didn't want to let Nicole go. He was extremely jealous. He parked his car in front of her house and also published compromising photos of her. After John was extracted from the car, the police began their work, recording eyewitness statements and studying the scene of the accident. They carefully recorded every detail, trying to reconstruct the chronology of events that led to the collision with the lamppost. The questions were aimed at finding out the true causes of the accident. It was their duty to find the truth for the sake of justice and safety. The firefighters, having completed their part of the job, were putting away their equipment and preparing to return to base. But one of the officers made a shocking discovery. In a ditch, 30 feet from the car, lay a woman, unconscious but still breathing. It was Nicole. She was taken to the hospital where doctors tried everything they could, but unfortunately, they were unable to save her. A few days later, police issued a statement saying the following: "A 34-year-old educational assistant and mother who died following an SUV crash in Burnaby last week suffered wounds that were indicative of foul play. The man is expected to make a full recovery, but the woman had injuries indicative of foul play." The autopsy of Nicole's body was conducted in the forensic laboratory, where she was taken a few hours after her death. An experienced medical examiner with many years of experience noticed the numerous wounds covering her body. Methodically and carefully, using professional tools, he proceeded to examine and fix all the injuries. Some wounds were deep and directed with obvious force, while others were more superficial, possibly indicative of a struggle. The total number of stab wounds counted by the examiner was 47. The wounds on Nicole's body were inflicted with 2 different knives. During the analysis, the expert not only recorded physical injuries, but also looked for possible marks that might shed light on the circumstances of Nicole's death. For example, missing defensive wounds on the hands could have indicated that the attack was sudden or that the victim was immobilized. The expert realized that it was his findings that would help law enforcement catch the perpetrator and get justice. Once the autopsy was completed, all of the expert's findings and observations were consolidated into an official report. This report became not just a document, but a key link in the chain of the murder investigation, providing the investigators with the necessary information to continue their work. After Nicole's death, her family, friends, and colleagues were plunged into an ocean of heartache that came upon them with an unexpected and uncontrollable force. Everyone who knew Nicole felt as if the world had stopped, leaving only the memories of her smile, the joy in her eyes, and unfulfilled hopes for the future. It was unbearably hard for the family to realize that they would never again embrace their beloved mother, daughter, and sister, hear her voice, or share the memories that were to be so many more. Nicole's friends, with whom she shared her deepest dreams and experiences, lost a like-minded person. They couldn't stop thinking about how hard she had worked to put her life back together, to make a fresh start, and to fight for her happiness. Nicole's colleagues realized how important a part of their lives and team she had been. The weight of the void created by her death was almost palpable, and each new workday was a reminder of all they had now lost. Nicole's cheerfulness and commitment to excellence was an inspiration to many of them, and this sudden loss made them realize how fragile human life is and how important it is to be more considerate of each other. Holidays have been the hardest for the family of Nicole Porciello. Carmine Porciello doesn't think he'll ever get used to his little sister not being around anymore. When you sit down for a family dinner, "It's hard not to notice her seat is empty," he told. "Where she would have been, she's not there." "13 days after Nicole's death, John Popel was arrested on November 29, 2018. Police have appealed to the public for any information that may assist the investigation.
Car crash. Just under 2 weeks ago, Nicole Hasselman was involved in a single car crash, and she had injuries that were suspicious in nature. And she died later in hospital, and I took conduct of that investigation. I can tell you now that yesterday, November 29th, 31-year-old Jan Popel was arrested and later charged with second-degree murder in connection with Nicole Hasselman's death. Mr. Popel will appear before a judge sometime today. This was an isolated incident, and those involved were known to each other. And there was no risk to the public safety. Our detectives worked very hard to compile and secure all the evidence for charge approval. And today's outcome would not have been possible without their tireless efforts. We recognize that this is a very difficult time for the family of Nicole Hasselman, for her friends, and for everyone else that was touched by Nicole while she was alive. And we just hope that we were able to provide some answers to the questions from Nicole's family. There is always that possibility that there is that one or more persons that have information that have yet to come forward to IHIT. We are alive to that, and again, that's one of the reasons why I'm here, standing here today, is that I'm speaking to those people that have information that perhaps for whatever reason they haven't come forward. Maybe they're just learning about this now. Please come forward today. We're always open to speaking with people that have information about any of our investigations.
Reconstructing the chronology of events was a critical aspect of the investigation into Nicole's death. It allowed the investigators to piece together all the available data to see how the events unfolded and at what time they occurred. This structuring of information helped to identify inconsistencies in John's testimony and analyze his behavior. After all, every minute could make a difference in understanding what exactly led to Nicole's tragic death. Investigators scrutinized surveillance video, phone records, and text messages between Nicole and John. This data provided the most accurate picture of where Nicole was at any given moment, who she was in contact with, and what exactly was going on around her. The chronology was also important to the prosecution's case against John. Without concrete evidence of his involvement in the incident, collected in strict sequence, it would have been difficult to convince the court of his guilt. As mentioned earlier, Nicole and John's relationship lasted 7 years, oscillating between breakups and reunions. But the chain of events leading up to Nicole's death began to unfold 9 days before the fatal car accident. Nicole had told John that their relationship was over by starting to communicate with another man, which reportedly took John's jealousy to unprecedented heights. On the evening of November 16th, he picked Nicole up in a rental vehicle while her son was at hockey practice and got into a dispute. John then pulled out 2 kitchen knives and began stabbing Nicole, who was sitting in the passenger seat, multiple times on her body. Then, instead of calling for help, John took off his bloody jacket, pulled out his cell phone, and started recording video. In a desperate attempt to save her life, she could be heard telling John that she loved him. John showed no remorse, telling her she was stabbed because he could not handle her moving on with another man. He then drove home, leaving Nicole in the car outside while he went in and sent some emails, one resigning from his job. Nicole spent 2 hours in the car while John sent emails, paid some bills, and even did some online shopping for a new TV and dishwasher. He then got back into the rental car and found Nicole still alive. It is believed he intended to stage a car crash to make it look like Nicole had died as a result of the collision. When John Popel slammed his foot on the accelerator and smashed into a streetlight at high speed, Nicole, who was not wearing a seatbelt, went flying out. Based on the evidence gathered, John Popel was charged with second-degree murder. The trial, which began in 2020 and lasted several months, was another ordeal for Nicole's family and friends. At the trial, the video that John Pupil recorded on his cell phone after he had wounded Nicole multiple times was played. Before the Crown played the video, the judge warned the courtroom that it was going to be graphic and invited those in the gallery to leave if they felt uncomfortable. The 1-minute video showed the injured victim struggling with her breathing. Pupil, seated beside her, can be heard claiming that she had disrespected him. Instead of calling for help, a jealous and vengeful John Pupil declared to Nicole that it was all her fault. "You just took from me, disrespected me for months and years," Pupil said on a video he recorded after he attacked Nicole with 2 knives. A visibly distraught Joe Porciello, the victim's father, left the courtroom during the playing of the video. Pupil sat with his head lowered in the prisoner's dock. Carmine Porciello, the victim's brother, shouted at him, "Watch the video! Lift your head up!" said the brother. The judge said she understood the video was upsetting and ordered that court take the 15-minute morning break. After the video, the father and brother were among 4 people who delivered emotional victim impact statements in court. The dad described his daughter as a beautiful soul and the pillar of their family. "You have destroyed our family," he said, addressing his remarks to Pupil. "We cannot forgive you for what you have done." The brother said the crime had reduced him to being nothing but a zombie, and added he was filled with anger and rage toward the accused. Crown Counsel Jacqueline Madden summarized a number of other victim impact statements, including one from the victim's young son. The boy expressed that his mother was his best friend and that he had lost part of his heart when she died, said Madden. In the ruling, the judge called Pupil's actions callous, cruel, and self-absorbed, but also said he has demonstrated remorse. Nicole's father, Joe Porciello, did not agree. "It made me sick to my stomach because if he was remorseful, he would have showed a tear in his eye," he said outside court. "He would show any upsetting. He looked like he was out for lunch when he came in last time in the courtroom." Pupil pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. The charge of second-degree murder carries an automatic life sentence. The next question was only how many years before he would have the opportunity to apply for parole. The prosecutor was pushing for a minimum sentence of 15 years, while Pupil's attorney wanted a minimum of 10 years. Both of these options did not sit well with Nicole's family. Given Pupil's history of abusive and jealous behavior towards Nicole, her cousin Gina Giuliano feels he should have been charged and convicted of first-degree murder, which brings with it no chance of parole for 25 years. "I don't think any number is enough, but if 25 is the maximum, I think that's what he should be getting," she said. "We have somebody who is not even 40 years old who, in the worst-case scenario, could be out when he's 50 or 55, says Giuliano. "That is unacceptable." In the week leading up to the sentencing, Nicole's friends and family have launched a social media campaign highlighting the voids left by Nicole's death and asking whether the punishment will fit the crime. "We can't have people like this walking our streets," says Giuliano. "We can't have precedent like this, showing that a vicious crime has a sentence so low that it makes it easy for anyone to do this crime." In a statement to the court and Nicole's family, Pupil expressed regret and remorse. "I've been waiting for this moment for a long time to tell you how sorry I am," he said. In April 2021, John Pupil was sentenced to life imprisonment. After 15 years, he will be able to apply for parole. Nicole's family said Pupil's sentence was not severe enough. They told a group of reporters outside the courthouse that justice doesn't exist in this country. Nicole's cousin Gina Giuliano said she was disappointed in the ruling. "In 15 years, he's actually eligible to be walking the streets," she said. "Is that what we want to tell our community?"